Fallout, Equestria, Murky Number 7. By Murky Number 7. A Long Way from Equestria. Fallout Equestria, Murky Number 7. Chapter 10. A Long Way from Equestria. All the other ponies in the world told her she was wrong. For believing in something we're all dreaming of. What is it like to not know your place in life? It's like being caught between worlds. Unable to fall to either side for fear of the consequence. Before she made me realize I had a life of my own, every day was just the same monotony. To simply wake up, sigh and go about your business. Never thinking, complaining or questioning. But with open eyes. It becomes harder. You see what slavery is doing to your life. How it's ruined mine. Ruined it in a way I could never heal or change, even if I were free someday. Every day the thought niggles in my head, to fall back into the knowing place in life. Understanding the mentality of the slave is tough for any pony who's known freedom. It's like a safety blanket, one that teases you not with comfort but with the knowledge that you can just switch off and go back to sleep again. To not deal with the issues of what slavery has done to your life. But on the other hoof, to want to be free and not even know what it feels like or what I should aim to be? That's almost worse. If I lost myself to the drive I'd be throwing myself on their guns or execution blocks in an insane explosion of emotion and heedless screaming to not have to work another day in Philadelphia. That and, well, what I just said a minute ago about whether escape would bring more harm than good to others. Like if the master followed me to make my life worse as I was dragged back. That's too much pressure and thought for me. I can never get away from him. Never. That thought hurts, it really does. If I sat and thought about it, I'm fairly sure I'd actually buckle under it all. If I ever fully comprehended the permanent damage done to me. Just as the temptation to go back into the unconscious acceptance that I will never amount to anything would trap me forever. The dreams that I held so dear could drive me to seek any escape I could. I'd almost lost control of that desire once already. Upon the precipice of the control tower. Protégé understood this. He saw that I needed to taste freedom to truly understand what I wanted and where I belonged in life. Other ponies may have their QT marks, but I didn't even have that to help me. All I had left was Glimmerlight to prop me up and Protégé offering his twisted logic and beliefs upon me behind a veil of apparent kindness and loyalty. How could I trust him? The pony who gifts me things or keeps my possessions safe alongside promises to make me better and eventually free. But shoots me to keep me under his iron hoof in a slave city. Every thought in my head just keeps hating him for that moment. Even with Weathervane's healing I can still feel the scar on my chest from the moment he crushed my one hope of freedom. But despite all that, against all logic and sense and whatever else smart ponies use to say something is explainable, I still don't feel threatened by him. Every time I tell him he doesn't know where I'm coming from. He says he does. Every time I cry. He knows why. Every single facet of my life he just somehow gets. And that's why I think I forgave him for stopping me. Even if I hate him. Because he is the only pony in the whole of Philadelphia that didn't just tell me things could be better or simply comforted me. He actually took steps to try and make things better. Whether I agreed with his way or not. What is it like to not know my place in life? It's awful, stuck between two worlds, being on the brink between slavery and freedom. Like being lost in a world of pain that ponies shouldn't know as opposed to the world we should have, that great civilization that was now lost. Yet all the while, unknown emotions and thoughts between beliefs, dreams, reality and terror that destroy any coherent path or plan run through your mind. But even before it got a chance to make me lost once more, he was already trying to light my way. I was galloping. Corridor to corridor, scampering around corners. Terror gripping my every vein and muscle so hard that my very skin crawled with stings and aches. He was out here somewhere, oh goddesses, why didn't I just stay with Protégé? He was hunting me, stalking me and and I couldn't hear properly to spot him. Rounding a corner, I glanced ahead. Wasn't this the way back to the cage into the shops? I could run out the back door and get away. But before I could even move, that cackling voice drifted through the thick air and darkness. Murky is my bestest slave. Woohoo, whoopee. Shrieking, I kept galloping. He was following me, following from nowhere and never leaving. The sound of the chains being pulled across the ground following my every move. I screamed for Glimmerlight, for Protégé, for any pony. Even as I ran, I tripped. And fell again. And again, my hooves just wouldn't stay under me, like they were being weighted down and trapped, unable to move. Please. Please. He's the smallest, sickest, all-around weakest pony. Pony. I couldn't stand. My legs just kept stopping working. The gunshot on my chest sucked and bled, my knife wound on my shoulder was cold and numb. Tears ran down my face. Why couldn't I stand? I had to go, he was coming for me. Why couldn't I gallop anymore? Desperately, I crawled, pulling my heavy body along behind me on tired limbs, my eyes unable to focus, turning the dark corridor of the mall into a misty and indistinct environment to try and navigate. Again, that voice, his voice, drifted through, closer. I could hear his hot breath and heaving mass as he closed in on me. Almost laughing, playfully muttering the haunting tune. I bet if I chain him all nice and tough into slavery. Slavery. Screaming, pulling, I felt his hooves wrap around me and drag me back before the thick collar snapped into place around my neck. I screamed, feeling my own mind pull me into his sway. He'll give the whole rest of his life to me. Flipped around, thrashing as the length of chain yanked my neck and head up, my eyes were forced open to see that leering face. Sickly breath through rotted teeth below light green eyes promising the depths of sheer sadism and control. And that welted scar sealing the deal. Even as he laughed, lifting a white-hot brand in the shape of an eternal chain, I kept screaming and pulling from his grip. Even if I got away, that chain kept pulling me back, again and again. Closer and closer to the huge figure of the master and that burning iron that stabbed downward onto my cutie mark. My mouth opened and howled as I fell and landed in a crying heap. Curled up, bawling and shivering, I kept pulling my hind legs in, expecting to feel the scald of the iron. Hooves were trying to hold me down. Fighting from under the blanket, I weakly kicked out and tried to scramble away until finally I heard her voice. Murky. Murky, it's okay. It's me. It's me. The blanket was pulled from my head, where azure eyes sparkled in the darkness before me. Behind me lay the sofa of the shop cell's back stockroom where we had been sleeping. Breathing hard, my face so wet with tears that it had dampened the woolen blanket, I felt my heart rate slowly begin to move down a few notches as Glimmerlight hugged me and stroked my back. It's all right. You're not the only slave who gets nightmares, I'll bet. Clinging tightly to her, I tried to reassure myself. Just a bad dream. But looking around and seeing the dark misty interior alongside hearing the eternal industry outside. The reality of Philadelphia was little comfort. The master had been strangely absent since I had returned, which had in turn only allowed my fears and memories of him to become bigger. More intense and mythical without a real presence to hide from. But I could never hide from myself. Every time I looked in a mirror or felt my own forehead it brought more hurt and connotations than any taunt or crack of a whip could ever do. Somehow. I had a horrible feeling he knew that his disappearance was having that precise effect and was doing it for just that reason. Sighing and sitting back from me, Glimmerlight glanced across to the doorway and saw the ambience was still fairly dark. Likely, it was still nighttime. Or a cloud of smog was just passing over. The past few days had become nothing but a whirlwind of activity to the point I didn't even know anymore. All we knew was what Protégé told us, that we had a few hours to bunker down and rest before work started again. Glimmerlight and I had curled up on opposite ends of the sofa with her insisting that I have the one blanket. Now, She began picking it up and placing it back on the sofa before returning to me. Still sitting on the floor, I was glancing from side to side, watching the darker corners of the room. Through teary eyes. It all seemed too familiar to my dream. Like so Mepony was watching from the shadows. Of course. Knowing certain ponies in here, there might well be. Don't worry about it, I don't think less of you for it, okay? Still sniffling, feeling my breathing returning to normal, I nodded shakily. I know. Want to talk about it? I'm all ears to any dreams, raunchy ones with Pip or not. Despite myself, I couldn't help but snort with laughter and blush with embarrassment while wiping my eyes. But I still shook my head. I don't really want to think about it. Sorry, you can go back to sleep. I'll just sit around and draw something. I don't really want to sleep anymore. Murky, you're tired. Come on, I'll sleep beside you, so you know your big sis won't be far away, all right? Smiling warmly as she reminded me of our bond of sorts, I was tempted, even if it was a little foolish sounding given my age. Or as close as I could guess to it. But friend or not. The drifting thoughts of sleep were too subconscious. Even a vague glance into the darkness of the stockroom felt too close for comfort. I could feel my body gently jittering with nerves and fear. No way could I relax into another sleep. I needed to think and clear my head a little. Watching me carefully through her clearly still very tired eyes, Glimmerlight pulled my saddlebag over with her magic, opened it and placed my journal before me. Apparently, Protégé had dropped off my things, much to my delight. And further confusion as to his intentions. Well. All right, Murky. Hey listen, why don't you go up to the roof? The back door brim and you got opened should have a fire escape nearby. Get a little fresh air, or as best as Philly ever has, and try to calm down a little, all right? I'll be just down here if you need me. Don't think twice about waking me up, all right? Picking up my journal with my mouth, I adjusted my reacquired fleece after messing it up in my post-nightmare thrashing and nodded to her. Past a muffled thanks and promised to see her in a little bit, I trotted off sullenly to make the long climb upwards. Pulling the door shut behind me, I couldn't help but see her still lying awake and glancing across at me, looking rather concerned. Waving gently, I heaved the door shut and moved off toward the rickety old fire escape. Hey there, Wastelanders. How you all doing on this cold Wasteland night? The answer should be we're doing great, DJ. Because you're still on the air. Hooray. Far be it from me to be egotistical to all of ya, but it sure will be what you're saying with our late-night lineup. Carefully, almost lovingly, I put charcoal to parchment and drew a line. The singular motion seemed to finally allow my heart to settle and my frayed nerves to gradually begin to ease. Despite the wonders of having a friend and the relief that my success in the pits had brought me, that one moment of just me and my artwork was never going to lose its calming impact. I sat atop the roof of the mall, alone, simply drawing and listening to DJ Ponthree's show. Nestled in a high-day hole between a few vents and metal boxy things, I was hidden from pretty much every angle while still being able to pop my head up for a look if I wanted. The air was thick and warm with that ever-present iron tinge to it. If anything, it was just irritating my throat and burning my eyes, but the lazy wind on my sweaty and shivering coat and mane was at least some comfort after the claustrophobic and dominating nightmare. My eyes were still heavy with sleep, but the idea simply seemed too terrifying. No. Better to stay awake up here and let others dream. I wouldn't be alone for I had my oldest companion to spend the night with. DJ Pon3. First up we've got a great little news flash for you all. Turns out, the recent troubles over at Sweet Apple Acres have mostly calmed down. That mysterious stable up there seems to have been saved from the Steel Rangers by. Yup, you guessed it, the stable dweller. Yay. I had to stop drawing for a second to hug myself and remember that she was still a force for good. Red Eye and Protégé claiming or hinting that she had left me behind and wasn't all that heroic was not going to last long in my mind. To even hear one tale of her exploits was enough to refresh my mind, and immediately my charcoal raced to yet again illustrate that brave mare. A flutter in the air made my skin crawl. Dropping the charcoal down, I ducked under the vent and watched the shadow of the passing Griffin team flash past along the rooftop. They would have needed to be directly above and looking directly down anyway. But there was no sense in advertising. That and random little flutters still made me nervous and started my stomach aching. That moment still stung. Raising my head up to make sure they were away, I got a good look at the surrounding area from the roof's height. It provided a commanding view of Philadelphia, just high enough to see across the city, but too low to see over the huge wall. When I had been climbing up the creaky fire escape, I had tried to distract myself by imagining Philadelphia as it once was before all this. But the effort was just too great in the light of being dragged back here. The chains had tightened all the more, locking and pulling me in. Now I could not see it for anything but the horror it was. Processions of slaves marched under guard away from the colossal crater, others could be seen hefting their heavy auto-axes in earth pits while guards trotted back and forth on suspended platforms. All were just tiny figures from up here. Through a set of tall, smoke-belching chimneys, I could spot the rickety roller coaster of the fun farm above the petting zoo and helter-skelter. The sight was oddly nostalgic, even for less than a week since I had cowered my way through every day in there. Now, however, things felt hardly different. We had failed in our escape, losing our most reliable friend in the process. Now, we were simply back in the machine. Unable to take on any more salvage missions due to such losses until Protégé's stock was back up to strength, we were all being relegated back to standard work shifts in the factories. So much was different. But nothing changed in Philadelphia. Now I'll bet many of you are saying, hey, wait, you told us that earlier. Well, of course I did, but now we've got the happier ending to the story. The survivors are coming out. Pave way, my little ponies, there's soon to be a new settlement in the wastes near Shattered Hoof. Get your trades all ready, folks, cause things are taking a turn for the better today. As for all you less than stellar raiding bastards listening in to try and spot a weak target, forget it. You had enough trouble with one stable dweller, well, here's a bunch of them. That, and they are under the protection of the Talons, so I hear. So don't even think about it. Now, just to mark this occasion, why not a little bit of music created by a pony from that very stable? Yes, folks. We all gotta have our rock and roll, take it away, Velvet. Glancing and smiling at my pit buck as the catchy fast beat kicked up, rear hoof tapping away without even intending it to, it occurred to me that Protégé would know I was outside due to taking my pit buck. But I frankly didn't care. The link to the voice of truth and hope was too much to give up. No, what I needed wasn't worrying. It was time to just think. Which meant time to draw. Charcoal slid, stopped and changed direction. It hesitated and then struck out boldly, waving to and fro before arcing around. I never checked drawings midway through, it just felt natural to let my imagination work and flow until it was done. Eventually, pulling back, I saw my creation. A rearing earth pony mare. Sunny. Below her, the rough-coated form of Cayenne bounded around her master. That wide-brimmed hat atop Sunny's head flew back as she shouted something unknown to me. Fighting back guilt, I allowed my eyes to drift upwards from the drawing to see the vista of Philadelphia once again. Oh. Sunny. I'm so sorry I brought this upon you. Part of me wanted to make her my next, well, mission? But I was just one little pony, hurt and weak right now and unable to make a difference inside the city of slaves. Wherever she was, Sunny was out of my reach. The thought of what she was no doubt going through was likely going to haunt me for some time. The same fate I had taken a suicidal run at the wall to avoid. Shivering, I had to fight to resist my mind telling me that the real reason I couldn't help her was because she was his and that I couldn't defy him enough to want to try. My dream had been proof enough of that, his shackles were still firmly entrenched in my soul. I had run from him outside the walls, but that was slightly different. Trying to rescue Sunny would be going up against him, not just running away from him. Sniffling, I turned the page, a new blank canvas of the yellowed parchment sitting and waiting. These last few days, I had been driven through my own worst fears of the times long gone. I had been working in a ministry, moving through long-abandoned houses and even lost in the depths of a dead stable. Memories long gone terrified and upset me in a way I couldn't describe, particularly those related to the last day. But Glimmerlight had shown me something else, how to look for the memories that could do things other than simply hurt. Without even realizing it, I had done it in the Ministry of Image by listening to that audio recorder. I had been learning a little, instead of burying it all under a mountain of sadness and loss. Without really knowing it, I felt my head descend to start drawing again. Aurora Star. That name had turned up a couple of times, hadn't it? The leader of this city's arcane magic hub who had visited Rarity and Fluttershy to hand over some sort of special memory orb. Then there was the scientists in the stable, they had worked under her, bringing some of that memory research in with them. Below me, small sketches formed, little wisps of creativity to show my mind's version of Rarity, Fluttershy and the Overmare. All had known Aurora Star to some extent. It was nothing drastic, she had been a leader in Philadelphia, so it only made sense they would know of her. Between some sketches, I drew light lines. From Fluttershy to Rarity, two friends, the ministry mayors. From both of them to a new sketch, Dr. Flowerpot, the pony Rarity had mentioned that I now knew that Weathervane had also worked with. I added him, then drew a line to Flowerpot. Lastly, I added an older mare with a star on her flank, my version of what Aurora looked like, given I had no idea what Aurora even meant. To her I drew lines from the Overmare, Fluttershy and Rarity. Wait. Weathervane had been involved in spell storage, right? His name had turned up from the stable details Glimmer had found. Leaning down, I drew a line from him to Aurora Star. Others might organize their thoughts by writing it all out, but to me, this was worth so much more. In front of me lay my understanding of the past related to a few little dots of history I had stumbled across. It was meaningless, a few bits of dead research that someday might prove useful to so many else. Incredibly basic, perhaps. But it was the train of thought that it permitted. Each dot was a separate piece of the past unto itself with the connections being the links between them all. Like what had my old master called them? Star shapes? Constar. Con. Shaking my head, I looked back down again. They were linked. Frozen moments of old Equestria, joined by connections that created an overall picture. It was like drawing the very fabric of the past itself. Rebuilding the shape and form that was their lives. What would it be like to find more? To complete the puzzle and find out? Well, everything. What had happened, why the world ended this way and who was responsible. Perhaps there were hidden secrets only permitted to those who found enough of it, who might complete this tapestry of memories. What might such a pony who delved into the past enough discover out there in the wastes? Sighing and sitting back, I could only look at my half-finished collection of sketches, occasionally joined by some lines. Strangely, seeing the past like this, in my own drawn style. It made it easier to contemplate. It got it out of my mind and down on paper, like any emotions I had expelled into art to escape the pain or sadness. Beep. That. And there was this too. The music was interrupted as the beeping started. In truth, I had expected it by climbing up here, almost hoping for another message from Sundial to help me relax. But after drawing out what I had, I looked on it as another opportunity to see the past with new eyes. Or ears. Beep. Click. Hi there. Hi. Well, I'm not sure what to say here. But well. I need to get this out somewhere. Oh Celestia, what is going on in my world? A shot of cold fear passed through me, Sundial's voice was breathless and scared. Like he'd just galloped for a long distance. Look, I may have to do something bad, to do something good. This world is coming crashing down, there's been reports of crazy huge spell testing going on and the shifts just keep going up. This entire thing is escalating again. My father's been recalled out to Hoofington to help cope with all the casualties there. Already, these stables aren't seeming quite so stupid. I need to get the money to afford Skydancer a ticket, only I just can't afford it. But I may have found a way. My drawing forgotten, I now held a pip-buck in my hooves, feeling myself sweating as I just stared at it. Sundial's life, to me, was a perfect image of a buck earning real pay in a job he wanted with a lovely special somepenny by his side. What had happened? When I came off shift today I was just crying, I couldn't stop. I've worked the maximum 60 hours this week and I'm still not earning enough. I'm just sorry, that drill I mentioned? We had another one yesterday, but they don't tell us it's a drill till they lock the door shut. Every time my nerves fray and I feel so guilty. It's driving me to the edge of sanity having to abandon her. Again and again. Each time it could be the real thing. But, even when I sat in the alleyway behind the factory this figure approached me. He just appeared from nowhere. I never saw his face, all cloaked up, but the accent was pretty exotic. I'm not an idiot. It was a zebra. He dropped this huge bag of bits at my hooves and said that I could have it if I brought him some plans of what it was we were working on. Celestia, help me, I'm tempted. I just want to protect the one I love. I've got no one to turn to about this, the Ministry of Morale is everywhere. Every sprite bot I see I'm afraid is watching me now, like they're just waiting to spring if I dare do anything. Even today, in Sundial's far-flung unfortunate future, I could relate to that feeling. When Pinkie Pie had set out to watch Everipany forever. She had meant it. It was silly, really, me worrying for what would happen here. Sundial had been dead for hundreds of years, I'd seen his skeleton. Had he given his ticket to Skydancer in the end? Was that even allowed? Or had he just been unable to get there in time? It only now began to occur to me that given enough time, this pip-buck would likely lead me to his death on the day the balefire was set loose upon Equestria. Yet something compelled me to keep listening, recording after recording. Sundial's messages were meant to be heard, he wouldn't have programmed them to play elsewise. He had made an effort to ensure the truth of the average pony's life was known to those of us in the Wasteland. I just wish I knew what to do. I even considered going to the guards about it, hoping for a reward, but there's no proof and the city's coffers are running dry on sheer industry these days. No. I have to decide myself. They must have been watching me, knew I was one they could exploit. Sundial's voice was cracking, tinged with frustration, anger, guilt and fear. I hate this. I just hate all this. I shouldn't have to make these decisions. Why me? Feeling tears drip from my own eyes for him, I could only relate in that I had asked that question of myself 1,000 times in the last few days since the pit. The most I could truly do was curl up around the pip-buck in my hide-a hole and try to pretend it would somehow make a 200-year dead pony feel better. I can't lose her. She's all I have these days. Nodding, I agreed, not just for him. Is it really worth it? To work with evil to find freedom from pain? I don't know, Sundial. I should go, don't want any pony else hearing this so. Well, bye for now. Bye. The pip-buck clicked and hummed for a second, before fizzing through its half-ruined speaker and locking back into music from DJ Pon3's station. Seething frustration began to build. Why did that war have to hurt him? Sundial was a nice pony, choosing the lovely and happy ways, not wearing any cynicism or warlike attitude. Why did it have to drag him in too? Oh please, Sundial. Come through this okay. But I knew the ending already. A skeleton abandoned in a refuse pit, alone and forgotten until I had found him. That did it. The old feelings dredged up too heavily as I felt myself curl up ever tighter and clutch the pit buck to my chest. The past could hold good, but right now, the all-too-familiar haunting feelings returning of what was lost. Well, I'm gonna be signing off in a bit, Wasteland. Even your good old DJ needs his shut-eye now and again. But for those of you like me, up late at night and worrying for others out there in the dark, here's a little something to match the quiet night air. Something to help calm those nerves. Good night, Wasteland. Sweetie Belle's soothing sweet voice seemed to whisper in my ears, gentle and caressing. A lullaby for all time to settle upset ponies and clear their minds. Still sobbing, I picked up my charcoal stick and cast the lattice of the past away to a new page. I could draw the past, I had learned. Time to make worth of it. The touch of my stick on the parchment stopped my trembling enough as I put all the heart I could into this one drawing. I didn't know what he looked like. But it didn't matter. Hush now. Quiet now. It's time to lay your sleepy head. Lines becoming curves, seeking to return a pony's memories to life. Just as DJ Pon 3 and Sweetie Belle had helped stop me being lost to the horrid past, I would do the same for him. Hush now. Quiet now. It's time to go to bed. Curves became shapes, restoring his presence in the physical sight of those he sought to deliver his tale to. He would be seen once more, if only to my eyes. A fate better than forgotten bones for the buck who had helped me from so long ago. Drifting, off to sleep. Leave your exciting life behind you. Shapes became life, gentle twists of the charcoal and jerks of my head to add in everything I could. The shape and flow of his mane. The thick and bulky pit buck that I now possessed on his right hoof. But not alone. I had drawn the shape of another with him, my mind's eye of sky dancer, radiant and bright to be with him forever, if only in my artwork. Lying curled up together, her wing over his back and her head nestled into his shoulder. Drifting, off to sleep. Let the joy of another land find you. Fighting my own tired eyes, I added the last details before finally dropping the charcoal stick and fighting a squeaky little yawn. There. Now they could be together no matter what happened in their lives. Hopefully. The same way they were together in the embrace of the goddesses now, at peace after the horrors they endured. Glancing upwards at the cloud ceiling over Philadelphia, my eyes blinked open only once as a small break in the thick red clouds drifted over. Tiny and quickly fading. But through it, a star shape, little dotted memories, drifting far from home in another world, a long way from the Equestria they knew. Even as the hole closed up quickly, I simply lay on my back and watched it as I felt my eyes slowly begin to close again. This time, my dreams were filled with nothing but the sweet thought of some Epony I might care about in the same way they had each other until the bitter end. Roll call. Ever Epony, get your skinny slave flanks out here on the double. I was already halfway down the fire escape by the time the shout came. Mixed bellows to wake up had gone out a few minutes ago. Given just enough time to gather my things, I raced to join the muster. Being late for roll call was and always had been a quick ticket to a hoof across the face or a whip across the back. Waking up had not been pleasant. For once, I had slept even vaguely soundly, but the ashy air and sickly tasting fumes had gathered throughout the night to lead me into a coughing fit upon waking. Foul black muck tinged with dark red had spattered on the ground, ejected from a throat that seemed to be filled with glass shards. That probably wasn't a good sign. Hopefully Weather Vane was still around. Glimmerlight was already pulling her crimson initiate robes on, staggering with heavy eyes toward the stockroom door. She turned back for just a second as I strained to close the heavy rear door. Come on. I'm coming. Sorry. Sorry. I looked up, seeing her robes. Glimmer, why are you putting them on if you're getting the bandages changed this morning? She rolled her eyes. So that Nurse Buck gets to watch me take them off, duh. With a giggle, she cantered on out. Dropping my saddlebag inside the stockroom, I hurried out after her to find every Epony not still recovering had gathered on the bottom floor of the plaza. Across the center, Around the fountain, lay dozens of mattresses or rolls of filthy blankets where the wounded lay in pain. A few remaining doctors from Hearts and Hooves Hospital were wandering around, slowly checking bandages and ignoring the moans from those left without any painkillers. Most had shrapnel wounds, often multiple on one pony, from the ranger's large and indiscriminate weaponry. Others bore burns or were choking up from smoke inhalation in the fires that no doubt had gutted the inside of the stable by now. A few nurses or basic healers also remained, including the blonde buck Glimmerlight seemed rather intent on meeting. She immediately cantered toward him, grinning over her shoulder at me. Most non-raider slaves made way for her. I could only imagine why. Making a beeline to stay behind her, I found myself having to hop, skip and jump over a few misplaced hooves thrown in my way to try and trip me. Both raiders and normal slaves taking what chances they could to garner some mild amusement at my expense. One harshly flung leg from a mangy raider mare caught my injured right hoof, making me yelp and limp away. A series of snorts and high-pitched laughter chorused through their ranks, often mimicking my voice. I dearly wanted to buck backwards and catch them between their legs as frustration and hurt built up inside me. But seeing all their friends clustered around and aching for some epiphany to start something, I just put my head down and limped over to catch up with Glimmerlight. Barb's raiders were spread everywhere alongside the master's cronies and bitter slaves nursing wounds. Many mattresses were strewn across the ground, bearing bloodied and resting injured slaves. Most had dirty bandages, but few seemed to have gotten full medical attention. Whether Vane's magic only had so much stamina for the dozens upon dozens of casualties. Already, I could see many of the mattresses were covered in blankets where once had been a still living pony before. The night had not been kind. Having seen the trip, Glimmerlight brought me round to stand on the opposite side of her, away from them. "Don't worry about it. Just stick near me, Murky. We'll find a way to make it through without brimstone." Immediately, despite nodding my head, the thought that we no longer had his protection was beginning to set in. What would happen the moment the raiders got in a mood to come for us in revenge? The amount of guards around the healers were providing security right now. But once they left. "Leaders here. Stand still, you Rex." The shout came from above, one of the leather-clad slavers making use of the balcony platform above the door to announce. Below him, the newly repaired cage door squeaked open, the large form of Rajni leading the way. I breathed a sigh of relief. Protégé was taking this roll call. My master himself strode in behind his ever-loyal griffin guard with a scroll and quill held within his telekinesis, followed by a small team of slavers carrying the day's oatmeal. Apparently, not even Protégé's intent to do his best for the slaves under his command could locate better food than the ubiquitous slime in a bowl. The actual roll call was somewhat underwhelming. No called names and no shouting your number. Protégé simply looked around us, sometimes checking with an attendant slaver for confirmations on fatalities during the night and ticking things off on his scroll. Somehow, given Red Eye's insistence to remember slaves, I figured it only right his student would attempt to do the same for his own stock. Eventually, returning to near the door, he spoke, raising his voice just enough to be heard. "Today's work schedule, listen closely. We've been pulled from scavenge duty." There was an uproar of indignation from the raiders. It occurred to me that they were in the majority of survivors, Wasteland weathered and tough, they had shrugged off many of the injuries I had seen claim normal slaves' lives. Protégé raised his hoof, awaiting a moment of calm. "We don't have the pony power left, so until new volunteers are in, we're back on standard work fares, as previously mentioned. Half of you will report in 1 hour to the scrap heaps outside Slit's factory for auto-axe reclamation duty. I offer the choice that for those of you unable to use an auto-axe may also move to the fuel refinery 2 blocks over. The following ponies are to report to me for specific work allotment in my office within the next half hour." Already, I was half expecting my own name to be on that list somewhere. My abject objective was simply to avoid wherever Barb and his lot ended up and if possible, the same place as Glimmerlight. I cast a glance over to her, but she wasn't looking back. No, what was she looking at? I follow her eyes and found it led rather unerringly to the nurse's flanks. Well. She wasn't wasting time getting into her promise made inside the stable. Blushing, I looked away before any pony accused me of looking at him too. Thunder Razor. Chris. Barb. Lemon Mint. As each name was called, I saw the individual ponies perk up. Barb and Chris, likely one of his shades, shared a glance and a strangely knowing grin. Rock Splitter. Murky number 7. Wool Stitch. Well. There it was. Immediately I quivered and felt a cold sweat break out as I saw Barb and his student leer at me. Oh no. Protégé, what are you doing? Not them. Glimmerlight's eyes shot right back to me, a cold fear clearly visible on her face as I felt her wrap one hoof around my neck. That's it. You've all got half an hour to get some food in you and have Dr. Weathervane check you if you're still injured. He'll be here in 10 minutes. I expect you all to work your best on these tasks. They are all important for the restoration of Philadelphia and Equestria as a whole. For achieving our master's dream of unity. That is all. The surrounding slave base murmured in displeasure. I could see why. Most of them had joined the salvage missions in a bid for freedom or less mundane work. But now they were being cast right back into it. Unfair would have been the word. Had slaves any rights at all? Protégé ignored the protests, turning on his rear hooves to march out again. He hadn't even glanced at me. Something I was a little glad for, given how slaves that received special treatment publicly became nothing but targets for night assaults to bring them down a notch. But as he reached a cage door, I saw another figure push past him. A foul, rotten reek came in his wake. The tall, half-bearded, and glasses-wearing ghoul doctor stomped his way back into the slave pen. Apparently, his estimate of 10 minutes was to be cut down severely. Feeling my lungs sear on each breath. I dearly hoped those saddlebags of his contained rad away. Right, you lot. Chow's in, get it now or lose it. Half an hour. Move it. Amidst the stampede of hungry slaves, I just stood still. Long ago I might have run as well, but arriving at the front of the queue only meant more ponies to hit me on my eventual beating to the back. By the time I had arrived at the rickety table used to hold the huge pot, my bowl received only a small drizzle of mostly leftover cold water. Slimy wads of thin oatmeal floated in the milky liquid. Sighing, I took the bowl in my mouth and left without complaint. Slaves were gulping what they could down, most of them long adjusted to the tasteless and thick gruel of a meal day in and day out. Surrounded by his students, Barb lurked in a shadowy corner, mostly blending with the darkness around him. Trotting by, I received another knowing gaze from the raiders' leader. Following me with an eye while taking wads of his followers' own meals for himself. Oi! You! Pegasus! Almost spilling my bowl as the sound seared through my sensitive ears. The shouting slaver shoved me to make his presence known. Haphazardly dropping the bowl before I lost my meal, the push sent a whip of pain across my shoulder. You been seen by the doc? No. Get on that mattress then. No time to eat and get checked. Fuck knows why he wants to waste time with you, gonna be dead in a couple days anyway. Whimpering as I was reminded, I morosely took direction and dragged my bowl to the mattress indicated near the fountain. Allegedly not fast enough, I found the slave guard pushing and knocking me toward the mattresses. Obediently, my rump thudded down behind me on the rotted mattress to wait for a doctor I frankly didn't want to see right now. After Minstrel. I wasn't sure I could ever trust one again. Now I had the scar to remind me of his attentions for the rest of my life. Stopping short of touching my forehead with a hoof, I stifled the shake and tried to distract myself by glancing around, searching for my together-by-life sister. Glimmerlight was nearer the shop cell we inhabited on another mattress, the blonde buck nurse already sitting beside her and checking the bandage around her forehead. Despite too much ambient noise to hear specific words, I could see she was happily chatting away to him. At least there was enough security around right now that I didn't mind being separate from her for a few moments. That, and I figured she was a little busy talking anyway. No need for a socially awkward little buck to get in her way. Across the hallway, I saw a nurse alongside blood bank trying to hold down a thrashing slave after informing her that she was going to lose a leg below the knee. The mare had been crying in pain all night, languishing as infection had eaten away with no potions or drugs to stifle it available for a mere slave, with or without protégé's authorization. Beside them, two healers were having an argument. "Shady Sands is dead to us now, look, we can wake him up, sure. So why not? We're healers. For what reason? This is just going to cause him to be too slow and sick all the time from now on until some slaver kills him for failing. It's more a mercy to let him pass now in peace under the boss anesthetic spell. You're going to just watch a pony die. I can't believe this. It's less painful for him in the long run, Tulip." Tuning them out, my eyes fell upon this Shady Sands. He looked fine. But I of all ponies knew that the deadliest things lurked beneath the surface. I clutched my sore chest, almost in relation to the quiet form of Shady. Had he just taken in too much smoke? Perhaps the worst realization was, this wasn't the first time I'd heard this same argument. Ponies in pens all across Philadelphia had argued the point about their comrades dying in their sleep from the poisoned air and radiation within their bodies. Many had debated with themselves, was one quick impact from a great height better than a lifetime of this? Amongst all of it, I only felt oddly at home. Ponies hurt and dying all around me, surviving only to face more. And worse. The fact I was even still trotting was a miracle unto itself. It was just the horrible cycle of slavery and unforgiving industry. All these slaves with healing knowledge could do was try their best. Or attempt to ease some ponies passing, knowing that they were in some way simply prolonging the pain. But for all their efforts, it was nonetheless a rather grim sight on either side of me. Occasionally, I would see a slave lying too still to be alive. A mare in a jumpsuit with a hastily stitched butterfly piece symbol morosely draped a cloth over one such poor soul. Even those still awake were not through their horror yet. Lack of medical supplies, particularly the valued healing potions, were giving rise to sharp screams as invasive telekinesis attempted to pull shrapnel out or clamp shut wounds. Feeling my right hoof throb, part of me began to worry what I might have to go through when they examined it. Oh please no, don't make it hurt. I wanted to run and hide in the back room, but the watchful eyes of a guard instructed to make sure we all got checked over kept my rump firmly attached to the ground. What in the grand fucking hell are you doing to that stallion? Get out my bloody way, you incompetent bumblefuck. The rasping tone soared above the others, attracting eyes and ears as Dr. Weathervane strode toward a mattress and almost threw a young healer out of the way. Landing on his rump, the buck let his primitive medical tools fall from his magic and watched as the ghoul began work on the burn victim that lay screaming below them. I trying to put the healing bandages. Shit. I'm 270 goddess damned years old and you're saying you somehow have worse eyesight than me? Don't you see that there? The clothing has stuck to his skin and you're trying to bandage it down? Celestia, save me from the shit Sunday you were trying to create with that. Ever hear of infection? Get out of my sight, you absolute fucking moron. But his protests fell on deaf ears. In a flare of magic, Weathervane began his work on the burn victim, putting him to sleep with a spell and stripping the clothing from the torso. The wet tearing sound and patched and blackened material only looked like a second skin being drawn from the stallion to my eyes, making me wince and look away. The sickening smell of burnt flesh, all too well known to any pony in Philadelphia, reeked through my nostrils and seemed to burn my throat. Whether or not it was my imagination, the gagging reflex led me to spasm and splutter on a thick cough. My sickness had only been staved off by 2 half shots of Radaway, one mixed with a thorough helping of soil, a cocktail I was sure that the Roma wouldn't be too interested in, but I could already feel it returning. Lying on my side upon the mattress only made me wince further as a popped spring prodded my left wing. I rolled to the right instead where the freshly plucked feathers still ached as well. Sighing, I let my head sink. Everything was sore somehow. Perhaps if I were squeaking in shock, I found my entire body moving of its own right to sit up properly. A magic field surrounded me as I saw the ghoulish figure of Weathervane stomp on over. Just what I need. I so much as magically touch you and you whine. Sweet fucking Celestia, I'm going to have a damned migraine by the end of this, aren't I? Now sit still, you're still healing and I can't say I'm over the fucking moon that you won't get proper bed rest. His horn waved over me, before immediately scowling and dropping his telekinetic field. If I had a bit for every stupid pony that doesn't follow prescription, I'd be richer than Red Eye by now. What the buggering hell do you think you're doing, Merc? I told you, one rad away every single day. Your lungs are too susceptible to radiation, they'll be lighting up again by the end of today after that little stint in the pits I hear you got. What happened to the 5 sachets I gave you? The harsh tone bit deep. I felt myself wanting to shrink back and cry at the mere thought. I'm sorry. They got stolen. I only got enough to stop it a few hours ago. Weathervane simply groaned and face-hoofed. Well, I don't have any more with me. We're not here to treat radiation. As for the rest, you're healing, slowly. I can treat the Pasprite bites now that they've closed with magic, but you are weak, Merc. Your gunshot and stab wounds are both closed over, but the areas are very sensitive. Any other hits in those areas and you could be looking at permanent problems. Fuck knows. You've got enough of them already. As he worked his healing spell, I glanced over behind the ghoul, spotting Glimmerlight pulling herself out of her robes in front of the nurse for a bandage change. It took some degree of effort to not blush and giggle at once as I saw that she was rather deliberately angling herself while bending down to slip it off her, wiggling her rear around. Sometimes I really could not believe that attitude of hers. Even after only a few days of knowing her. The nurse was rather openly blushing and fighting to stop a grin on his face. Hearing him laugh almost politely, I saw her tail whip up and stroke under his chain accidentally. Oh great goddess's grace, she was good at this. Pulling my eyes away, I stared at my left hoof to check on the progress of the bites. Weathervane's magic was indeed closing the small Pasprite wounds that had stung incessantly since the Ministry of Image hub. During the night, I had sometimes tossed and turned trying to sleep on the sofa, feeling like they were eating me again. Under his magical care, I was beginning to feel the lack of sleep as a warm and fuzzy tingling passed from area to area like a soft massage. But his forward-speaking manner was landing hard. Pressing my front hooves to my chest, I just wished I could. Well, do whatever it would take to cure my tainted lungs. I didn't want to go away. Not like this in a slave pit. Weathervane ceased his work for a second, glancing down at me. His voice was harsh, but professional. Mortius. What's it now, kid? Spluttering on my own ragged breathing amidst tears, I looked up at him, the rest of me shrinking back onto the mattress. My voice felt unbearably weak. Doctor. Am I going to die? His beady eyes focused briefly on me, before returning to his work. Through the harsh rasping tone quality that emerged from his ruined throat, I could have sworn there was a very tired mood. 270 years, Merc. Performances going wrong, a great war, the balefire. The Wasteland. I've heard those words more times than it really matters anymore, kid. Shit. It's not easy to keep hearing them. You'd think I'd get used to it. But no, something in me just keeps fucking caring. She may have helped ruin my world with her place in creating the ministries, but flutter she had ideals. We all swore them. To bring peace, harmony and comfort to all ponies. I quote, no matter how bad this becomes. Well, this is still Equestria and we're still caring. Just sometimes I feel like I'm the only fucking one left. Blinking, I sat still and attentive. His eyes had left me, staring into space or around him at, I guessed, Philadelphia in general rather than just this scene of pain and suffering. Even so. Feels a long damn way from the home I knew, if you get me. I didn't. Home was an alien concept to me, muddled only by the occasional niggling feeling that it might end up being here in Philadelphia. Dr. Weathervane grumbled and reached out with his magic again to apparently scan across my chest. Without more Radaway in the next 18 hours, I'd not rate your chances too high. I can see you've taken some, but those pits have high ambient levels that have aggravated your bronchial tubes. You won't feel it more than an itchy cough right now, but that'll start growing in the next 4 hours into the symptoms you'll recognize. This tainted shit. It turns quickly, hits a certain critical mass and then you'll feel it. Even Weathervane managed to contain his impatience as I fell to the mattress, covering my eyes with my hooves, sobbing away. This just wasn't fair. I wanted out. Not to just linger and die. My mother wouldn't ever know. After a few seconds, I heard Weathervane stomp his hoof lightly to get my attention. We've got none with us, that's all locked away in Hearts and Hooves Hospital. But see if you can't let Protégé allow you to swing by later tonight. Come into the basement and I'll see if I can't dig some out of the stock rooms. You're the only Pegasus I know of in this region of the world. It'd be a crime to let you simply expire. There's worse bastards out there and, Fluttershy, forgive me for saying this, plenty of ponies who deserve life a lot less than a well-meaning, if whiny, little slave buck. My heart lifted, he would help me. I almost wanted to hug the squishy old ghoul for offering. He was rude, abrasive and clearly somber regarding the world he had lost. But how could I not respect a pony who still followed the oath he had sworn even through the apocalypse? Thank you. Quiet down, you stupid ass. You know about my basement, but I'd rather most ponies still think it to be an irradiated area of nothing. Now sit still, I'll keep helping you because it's what I do, but if you keep up these insane escape attempts there won't be a body left for me to heal. Almost angrily, I felt my head yanked up as he began to examine my new scar. Even feeling it being watched by him, I felt oddly ashamed. Ugh. That simpleton had no fucking clue. Who? That shit-eating donkey rapist calling himself a doctor that treated this wound. I talk about oaths? Well, he broke every single one in the entire damned book in what he did to you. I swear. If this were old Equestria and he'd done this to Somepony, even Fluttershy might have raised her voice. Believe me. It wasn't fun whenever she did. Leaving a scar like this. Fucking amateur. Letting my head drop again, I just curled up on the mattress as Weathervane backed off. Now, you're checked over, so try and get some rest, Murk. Oh. And to repeat one more thing? Looking up, I remained still and small upon the ground. His healing had worked, the bites were gone. But the ache on my chest, shoulder, right hoof and forehead remained. Clearly, it'd require more than he could spare right now to solve them. Even my wings still stung from pulling feathers. No more escape attempts. His raised hoof caught my attention before I could even open my mouth to protest. Boo. No buts. No fucking buts. Always with the fucking buts. You are too weak and too hurt to do anything more. Put your head down, stay out of trouble and get on with the work in Philadelphia. That's the best thing for you right now. No. Please, I can't go back to that. Stick with those who'll help you, that mare from earlier, Pink Mane. Just you and her help one another and you'll perhaps find some way to be more content. But escape isn't possible in Philadelphia. Not from inside the walls. I don't want you losing your life chasing some stupid dream, not one of the last living non-enclave Pegorsi. Take it from me, patience and keeping your head down is the way. I lasted 2 centuries through harsher days than this. The first days after the balefire. No settlements, trade or currency. Just brutal aggression, anger and bitter loss turning Equestria into a living fucking hell. Chances come, history changes, life goes on. I'm not asking you to start agreeing and enjoy it. Just don't rush headlong in. Equestria doesn't need another young corpse. the wave of hurt was coming crashing down. My forehead ached, the scar thumping and flaring in sharp pains as the advice was given to me. But I nodded. Strangely, not even knowing what I was doing, I found myself feeling more sorry for him than I. He'd lived with the world he hated for generations already. Did you lose any pony, when it happened? His eyes flared, as though about to launch into another curse-filled tirade. But restraining himself, Weathervane merely nodded, speaking quieter than I had ever heard him do so. You know, in this arse-backwards fucking city, that's the first time I've even been asked that. HMPH. Come along tonight, Merc. We'll see about your lungs with some Radaway. Perhaps something else too. If I can remember the spell. Now, stick with it, mare. Stay safe, because you will not hear the fucking end of it if I have to put up with any more filly-like whining from you than I already do. Caduceus should be done changing her bandages now over there. He nodded his head to there behind him. Glancing over, I could only see an empty mattress. Noting my confused look, Weathervane turned inside. Oh, piss balls. Where have they got to? Approaching the shop stall to collect my saddle bag, I couldn't help but ponder on just what kind of special job Protégé needed both myself and two lethal raiders to report to his office for. I only had a few minutes before I needed to head up, but I was intent on going up early. No way was I going to wander the corridors with Barb when he made his move. Pushing the stockroom door aside, I blinked to adjust to the gloom, turning to wander past the corner toward the larger part of the room. Hey. Oh, you cheeky mare, you. I stopped dead. Oh. Oh dear. Sounds, like that I had heard from Sundial's message with Skydancer, were drifting around the corner that separated the doorway and stockroom. Muffled giggling mixed with the sound of a little movement under a blanket. Poking my head around the corner just fast enough to bite my saddle bag and pull it out from where I'd left it at the edge of the stockroom, I only saw a rather actively moving blanket upon the sofa, before I whipped back around and pressed myself against the wall to slide out. A buck's sudden intake of breath and soft tease was followed by another of her soft and low laughs. Hot. Can't a mare in this crappy city take what opportunity she can to have a little fun? Sometimes, hypersensitive hearing really was a liability. Feeling my face burn brighter than my lungs ever had, I couldn't exactly tune out the little gasps and soft moans that drifted out of the blanket amidst. Truth be told, I probably should have known Glimmerlight well enough by this point to have expected this. Perhaps I would just come back and see her later. Ooh. Well. You certainly do know your anatomy, Mr. Healer. Much later. Protégé's office was in as much a state as it normally was. Strewn with books of all shapes and colors around that thick desk, if it weren't for the cleanliness of it, comparatively, anyway, I might have thought it just another wrecked room of the Wasteland. My master sat behind his desk, a quill fluttering to and fro while his eyes darted from the scroll before him to a large tome held on a bookstand to the side of the desk. Master, you asked me. Hold 1 second, Merc. Fighting back a squeaked apology for interrupting, I stepped back and averted my eyes from his writing. Instead, I took notice of one new addition to the room. On the far edge of his desk sat a memory orb container, laying open. Inside lay the 3 remaining spell orbs the Slavers had confiscated from Glimmerlight. It didn't surprise me she hadn't been allowed to keep it, given their apparent rarity. After a second or two, I felt my ears twitch and perk up. Protégé was muttering under his breath as he wrote. So low. I imagined even he thought that my hearing couldn't spot it. Lying down on all fours and closing my eyes as though resting, well. I kinda was. I concentrated on listening, fighting the nagging feelings that I shouldn't be eavesdropping on my master. That everypony has some role they can play in the recovery of our world, regardless of their flaws or fears. Your faithful student. Protégé. I heard the scroll wrap up before I opened my eyes. Another letter to his teacher, clearly. Unfortunately, This indication of any weak ponies still having things they could do hardly reassured me about this special job. Across my life, special jobs tended to simply mean more dangerous or liable to be disgusting. Back on the rock farm, I had always been the one chosen to mark out the Brahmin or stand watch for raiders during thunderstorms on account of no pony being around to stand by my side. Apparently, even having a few who would didn't make any difference in here. How could things change so much but still feel utterly the same? The ache in my tooth, almost on cue, made its presence known. Just another job for just another day, with the chains pulling me ever closer and tighter. I wasn't any closer to escape than I had been sitting in my pigsty. The master likely was right. The imagery of my nightmare flicked in my mind once again, that mocking laughter. "Thank you for waiting patiently, Murk." Popping back to my surroundings from the daydream, I refocused my eyes and lowered my head. "I can only wait to serve, Master." His head inclined to one side, leaning on the desk. "You're sounding a little more autonomous today, is something wrong?" Sorry. I'm. There was no sense in lying to him, he'd spotted a mile away. "I'm just afraid this is all I'll ever be, a slave in Philadelphia till the day it finally kills me." "So you're afraid of being a slave forever? So you've fallen to being one even more?" A curious mindset. But tragically pessimistic. "We shall make more of you, Murk. I believe you have earned at least an explanation by now. Are you ready to go?" "Huh?" I couldn't deny an interest in knowing just what it was he had in mind for me, but right now? Just out of nowhere. But Master, what about my shift? What about the other ponies like Barb coming up soon?" Protégé was already trotting to his stand and pulling on the holster for his revolver, before moving past me to the door. "This is your shift, Murk. The others will be seen to by Rajni, she has all the information to direct them to whoever it was that required their services. But you have something else to do. Follow, Murk, we're going out." Half cantering to catch up with my master into the corridor, we passed Rajni, standing guard in a small room near to his office. A knowing nod from Protégé sent her to await the others in his absence. Briefly, I wondered about her. She had protected me from the master, then shot me and finally spent time insulting me on every meeting. Yet I barely knew anything about her. Any questions likely wouldn't have a chance as I found Protégé slowing down to allow me to trot alongside him, rather than behind him where I felt my place truly was as the slave. We passed down the stairs, clearly headed for the main entrance. Slave guards stood more at attention as he passed, sinking back into lazed slumps in their posts once he was gone. If I looked behind us. "Master, where are we going?" "Not far, Murk. There is a view I would like you to see before I explain anything in a building nearby." Suffice to say, a little context is very important. Passing through the entrance, we were met by buffeting winds that stirred the factory fumes and sent whirling dervishes of black dust arcing down the roads. Passing by a group of carts pulled by thin slaves devoid of all emotion by the exhaustion of the day, I found Protégé leading me not on the main streets that would take you to the factories or mills, but into a small courtyard off to the side. High-rise buildings rose from the ground near the mall, their top halves having collapsed off as though sheared by a massive axe. Judging from the heights, the sturdier mall had shielded the bottom half while the tops had simply been blown away to collapse all over the dead park on the opposite side. Huge chunks had also torn part of the elevated monorail that passed between the high-rise buildings clean off, making a ramp up to it from the ground into the courtyard. After a few more minutes, it became clear that the entrance to one of these buildings was Protégé's intent. What was left seemed almost like a jagged castle of thick concrete supporting pillars and bent iron rods. Burnt curtains flapped through shattered windows on some floors in the wind. I don't think this is a good place." "Calm yourself, Murk. They supported the weight of 2 centuries of wear. 2 small ponies won't cause them to collapse. And not that. Ponies died here. This was their home. Reaching the low and wide steps that would take us to the shattered glass of the front doors, Protégé stopped and looked up at the missing top floors. After a second, it almost seemed like he was trying to imagine it whole and rebuilt. Glancing over my shoulder at the small mountain of destruction the top half had created behind us, burying the park, I found it all too easy to wish it hadn't. A park would have been nice. Yes, it was. As was everything the unfortunate souls of old possessed in this city. We won't be going too high. Now. Let's get going, we shouldn't take too long. The interior was as desolate as the stable. Spilled bags filled musty corridors lined in rubble. The whine of auto axes and screams of slavers were heavily dulled in here, punctuated only by the roar of factory shift horns or gunshots. Protégé trotted ahead, seeking another staircase after the main one had proven to have collapsed. Taking my small nervous steps, I occasionally had to canter forward to catch up. Master Red Eye's workforce hasn't gotten around to this tenement yet with so many factories left to reactivate. Truth be told, I've been tempted to get a few volunteers to scout it out soon. Isn't that what we're yaff? I cried out, backing off as I glanced into a room and witnessed a small pile of bones facing away from a window that overlooked the direction of the crater. Pressing myself back against the opposite wall, I gently shuffled away from the apartment's doorway. Having turned in concern, Protégé trotted across and glanced in himself before sighing. It's likely that won't be the only one, these flats I believe were still being lived in when the missile struck. Not all ponies could afford stable tickets. I nodded, shakily. Sundial had the same problem. Almost to my surprise, I felt Protégé's hoof touch my shoulder in apparently concern. Are you all right? You can keep going? Shivering. I didn't know if it was from the bones or from his suddenly caring tone fighting with my hatred of the pony who had stopped me. I wanted to throw myself at his hooves and beg to be helped as much as I wanted to buck his face for what he'd done to me and others. Yes. The stable was worse. I know, Merc. They often are. Come on, drop beside me, we're almost there. Almost where, Master? You'll see. He broke a little questioning as his hoof gave me a little nudge to match his pace, dropping down to trot properly after a few seconds. Ducking below a sparking gem-encrusted conduit that had fallen from the ceiling, I saw Protégé point wordlessly to a sign door at the back. Almost to my glee, I saw it had a little picture of stairs beside it. Some ponies were considerate. Moving on upwards revealed only more dead corridors filled with enough luggage to make an assumption that the ponies in here had received just enough warning to make one last dash for safety. Likely the haunting sirens had been the only warning these ponies got. Whimpering, sticking close to Protégé, I tried not to look at my hooves as we picked our way around the still-clothed skeletons that lay beneath the luggage. B. Whining loud enough and stopping dead, the sound of some sort of alarm began to pick up in my ears. I would have thought it to be Sundial, had we been any higher. No, this was muffled. Further away. Protégé. What's that? What's what, Merc? Of course. He couldn't hear like I could. Something up ahead of us. Like a beeping. An alarm. B. Shaking his head, my master continued trotting along, staying silent until he knew what it was. Sticking close behind him, it occurred to me that beneath that student barding I still didn't know what his QT mark was. Probably just a book or something. Maybe a padlock to stick with a theme was one of the ponies keeping me in here. Continuing along the corridor, I could see them all through some of the blasted walls of wrecked rooms. From these few flights up, likely just short of Sundial's message limit, I could still see the main entranceway. No slaves were traveling, probably not yet the time for them to head out. B. Further along, Protégé stopped, more intently listening, before, almost to my shock, I saw him draw his revolver with a small magic burst. Master, what? got something on EFS. He was looking apparently at the wall. B. 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 KSSH. KSSH. Oh no. Please no more. I've had enough of scary things from the past. I can hear something moving. Lowering myself to the ground, I just shivered as the second noise accompanied Protégé glancing around in a full circle to check the area. Don't worry. It's not hostile. Well. Yet. But I don't see any movement, it's just standing still about 20 meters to our left. Come on. Ok. Creeping forward, I stuck nearby to him. This was a little surreal. This pony had shot and recaptured me. Yet here I was, less than a day or so later following him on some special mission or job. Even if I knew why. It still confused me why I did not feel anything but pain and hate for him like I did the master. Rounding the corner, I saw Protégé glance down the hallway and jerk back. B. 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 KSSH. KSSH. Gradually, after glancing at me, Protégé rearmed his revolver and advanced once again. Moments later, he lowered it. Well. Would you look at that? Nervously trotting out, I saw the source of at least one of the noises. Ahead of us, a strange multi-limbed machine was sweeping the floor, hovering about a foot from the ground. Only it wasn't sweeping everywhere. Just one small patch that had almost been rubbed clean to the concrete. Many of its limbs hung uselessly while the magical energy keeping it afloat, similar to the sprite bots, I presumed, seemed to flicker and make it stutter in the air every few seconds. Apparently seeing us advancing, a nice stalk whirred round to face us. BRRRRKLO, sirs. BRRRRK about the mess. The eye turned back to its work, leaving us to simply stare at this strange, forgotten robot. An old clean and handy, huh? I should see about getting your friend Glimmerlight to take a look at it. Might still be recoverable. I'm sure she'd enjoy it. But the beeping? I could still hear it. Above the soft sound of the old robot sweeping 1 square foot of floor, it was still going off around us. Protégé had holstered his weapon, apparently seeing nothing else on EFS. Well. I'd thought it was this old robot, but it's on our way. No doubt we'll see. Gently pushing our way past the cleaning robot, BRRK so sorry sirs. Protégé began leading me toward a side of the building not facing the mall. The hallways were more deserted here, hiding larger rooms that were oddly empty. Were they vacant or just ponies who could afford a stable as well as bigger lodgings? Not that I was complaining. The fewer skeletons, the better. Already, I was surprised I wasn't crying. Had the stable desensitized me that much? The beeping became louder, more directly audible. A room up ahead. Protégé pushed himself past a fallen wall that led into a rather vertigo-inducing drop where a portion of the building had ripped apart in the collapse. Edging carefully, I tried not to look down. What kind of pathetic Pegasus was I? Afraid of falling. But my fears quickly relocated. The sound was coming from the next doorway. To my surprise, I saw Protégé seem to relax as he got close enough to hear it properly. I think I may know what it is. Without waiting, he bucked open the jammed door, causing a great mass of dust and fragments of rubble to drop from the weak doorframe. Walking calmly inside, I couldn't find the same ease of mind. If it wasn't dangerous. That didn't mean it wouldn't. Wouldn't be. It was. The moment I trotted in behind Protégé, it was revealed to be something as simple and depressing as it sounded. Before me in the apartment lay an open door to the bedroom, its alarm clock consistently sounding a 200-year-old wake-up call to the couple that were still on the bed. Their blackened bones curled around one another in a final embrace. They must have realized there was no way to get to the ground floor or basement in time. And just lain and waited. No, the stable hadn't desensitized me. Not at all. Feeling my hooves go weak, I turned and backed out on shaky legs until I could fall against the side of the rotted couch and cry. With as much coughing and sucking of air between sobs, it still didn't stop my oldest and most common flaw and reaction coming to the fore. Each shrill beep of the alarm clock serving only to send further stings of hate for this world into my mind. Eventually, it ceased, a small click as Protégé's hoof finally ended the little machine's wailing. I heard him trot out behind me. It hurt to be so upset and sick in the presence of my master, but even as I felt him wander over beside me I expected to feel the curt order and insistent pull to keep going. I didn't expect to feel his hoof rest over my shoulders to try and comfort me. With all my life, I hated him. The one pony more than even the master who had turned me back at the last possible obstacle. The one who had put a bullet in me. But right now, he was the only one caring for me. Before I even realized what I was doing, I had flung myself against him, taking refuge in the small measure of kindness he offered, crying my heart out into the shoulder of some pony I could not recognize as either a master or an ally. We sat apart, afterwards. Protégé had quietly asserted that this run would do. For what reason I didn't really know. I simply sat against a side cabinet, meek and trying to not feel embarrassed about what I'd just done. My eyes still felt red and sore, hopefully hiding the minor blush as I tried to work out why I'd done that. Why I'd sought shelter in him as much as I would in glimmer light. Protégé had remained unflappable, simply keeping that one hoof gently held on the back of my neck as I had let the sadness all out. Afterwards, he seemingly showed no real reaction. Almost a little withdrawn. Only now, he sat and stared from the window. I had to hide my eyes as he turned toward me. "Are you feeling better? MHM. Don't be ashamed, Murk. You aren't the only pony who feels sadness of what has been lost in this world. By all rights. None of this should have happened. I think no less of you for showing it. If anything, it has provided the context I spoke of without me really even having to say it myself, although that is getting a little ahead of what I brought you here for. You promised that you would begin to show me what it is you want with me." He seemed to slightly wince, as though not liking my wording of that particular point. "To show you how I intend to help you, is the better way I think of it. Master Red Eye helps ponies, if they allow themselves to become helped. I want you to be the next one. You might do Equestria proud, aiding us. However, I cannot order this of you, thus it is that I must give you your first step along the path to freedom as I see it. To make a choice to help Equestria by your own decision. Or to willingly say no. It is in this sense that I can now, away from unfriendly ears, tell you that I require your help with something. Something that, for all my authority, I cannot ask of you in my stead as a work leader under Master Red Eye." My mind reeled. Protégé had a job for me that needed done off the record. Something that he could not risk others hearing, to the point that he had separated me from everything else and other duties simply to find space to ask it. I didn't know how to reply. What to think. How to look. The idea that a master was giving me a choice was unfathomable. I had chosen before, but only for myself or those who were also slaves. Come here, Murk. Moving toward where the window had once stood, Protégé beckoned me with a hoof. On cue, I lightly trotted over, glancing through the view from the side of the building, gazed toward the wall. Behind it, the southern hills of Philadelphia's region rose up. The same ones the stable had been buried beneath. But the view was dominated by one building. Sheer-faced with dark marble and laced with balconies and turrets, it held a grandeur not often seen in Philadelphia. Around it lay a thick pre-war security wall topped with razor wire. Slaver guards could be seen permitting processions of limping slaves in through a mesh gate. "So Mepany else's slave pen?" My master merely nodded, before pointing out a giant brass symbol of a six-pointed star. "That, my dear Murk, is the Ministry of Arcane Science hub in Philadelphia. Or what once was the hub anyway. It has since fallen into a multi-purpose use. both as a workers' accommodation on the lower floors and specialist repair on the upper areas using the tools they have in there. What I need from you, is for you to steal a piece of technology for me. Staggering back, my mouth gaped open. Suddenly, the reason for such secrecy had become apparent. But I understand this is asking a lot of you, Murk. But this piece of technology would permit workers like yourself under my care to eat and drink with less fear of contamination. It's called a sparkle sanitizer, developed near the end of the war by the Ministry Mayor herself while experimenting with ways to counter balefire radiation. Eventually, other projects far larger, ones never committed to any record I know of, took her attention and it was sent here to be finished. One prototype made it to completion before the missiles fell. And it lies in there. Pointing with a hoof, he indicated the ministry hub itself. From up here I could effectively see a layout of the entire courtyard surrounding the area. Mostly worn away, I could see piles of wreckage had been thrown in corners by the slaves. Even as I watched, one slave was being bucked repeatedly by a guard for dropping something. Whoever ran that slave pen was clearly not like Protégé. Pulling a small folder from his saddle bag, Protégé dropped it before me. From within slid carefully drawn maps matched to the layout of, I guessed, the ministry. I can provide blueprints, directions and descriptions, Murk. But do not think of this as me seeing you only as my personal thief. No. I only ask because you will be bringing hoarded technology to the good of others, not just yourself. This is your challenge to accept or deny. Not my order to give. Should you be successful, however, I feel it would do you some good in beginning to realize the reality of choice and risk. That. And I may be able to redirect some resources this technology would save me to try and help you survive, Murk. Weather Vane told me about your sickness. My hooves crossed over my chest, almost embarrassed. That caring look in his eyes simply made me want to look away. The feeling of throwing my hooves around my master to cry and let it all out was still jarring and uncomfortable. You didn't do that. I won't hold it against you should the decision be to simply return home, Murk. This is your choice. Master. Why are you doing this for me in particular? Why not Glimmer or some other pony? They want to be good too. There was a small silence. I wondered if he hadn't expected that question, leading to this quiet thought. Eventually, he let the eyepiece drop into his hooves, turning it over a few times, staring deeply at it. Finally, he slotted it back behind his ear and stood to leave. I want you by my side, Murk. You and I are more alike than I think you know. In the end, I believe you want more than simply to be away from slavery. I think you want the same as I. To be free of this world. To find some place that might be better. You understand the hurt of this world more than most, you were born into slavery and misery. That is why I picked you to offer these opportunities to in lieu of the freedom I cannot give you. Good day. Trotting away, I could not quite believe what I'd just heard. Protégé had always stood as a sort of beacon of conviction toward Red Eye's work. Only now was I beginning to see the true emotion that lay behind that unwavering obedience and loyalty he showed to his own master. It was nothing more than a desperate wish to escape the reality of the Wasteland. Sitting against the cabinet, watching him leave, my own feeble mind couldn't ever hope to dredge up an appropriate response. Only one thing came to mind. Protégé had helped me from the moment he had met me. Our confrontation in my escape attempt was a solid brick wall that prevented a true trust in him. But he hadn't turned away from trying to aid me in what ways he could. He had even comforted me in my moment of weakness earlier. A caring master. There was but one thing I could give that I knew I possessed. Master. Wait. He turned. Please, I took this from the stable for you. Digging into my saddlebag, I bit and drew out the hardback book. A book? Why, thank you, let's see. Seeing Protégé's magic draw it across to his face, flicking open to look at the inside cover, I found myself biting my lip. I didn't even know what it was. His eyes drew back and forth for a few lines. He smirked. Daring do. And the quest for the sapphire stone. A tale of a broken and hurt Pegasus. Unable to fly, as she faces an almost impossible task. His eyes looked up as the book slid into his own saddlebag. Appropriate. No? Turning with a curt and grateful nod, I heard him trot away down the corridor as I listened to his hooves gradually fade away in the abandoned building, leaving me alone in the room to make my decision. For the longest time, I simply sat and stared upon the Ministry of Arcane Science. Not at the slaves. Or the horrid scrap constructions that repaired its marred walls that must have once gleamed, but at the symbol of the six-pointed star. From last night, I had realized that the stars were the holders of memories. They symbolized the past. I had seen the shapes that made up a long-forgotten world, told only in patchwork across the canvas of time. Now before me lay the largest icon to support this. An entire ministry whose work had been the preservation of memory. They had sought to help future generations, Wasteland or not, to understand the past. They were, in some way, the true visionaries. How did I know that word? Of helping to create the better world that protégés so dreamed of. That I dreamed of. Pulling my saddlebag over, I slipped the maps inside, before strapping my pitbuck to the left hoof out of the way of injury. Slipping my goggles on and adjusting my fleece. I took one last look at the ministry from above, noting the only way in I could make out across the old monorail track. Stars were memories. Aurora Star had led this place. Sundial and Sky Dancer were with the stars in the past now. It all came together in one great dream that this building had been a part of. That someday the stars might aid in our escape from the wasteland itself. Finding my way up onto the monorail was not especially difficult. On the way in I had seen the broken shaft that could act as a means with which to access the elevated platforms. Old trains lay dormant on the tracks while others had simply been blasted off and cannibalized by Red Eye's workforce. Presumably, the ones up here were too difficult to work on right now. Picking my way through the buckled interiors for cover or hopping over thick singular tracks, I slowly crept toward the ministry hub itself. The monorail passed close to the edge of that barbed wall. My hope was that there was something I could land on safely to jump off. Those piles of scrap had looked promising, piled against the walls to offer a somewhat rough ramp to break my fall. Slavers wandered the courtyard surrounding the crenellated walls. Most were directing slaves to carry boxes on their backs, carts or with magic inside. Large piles had been set on pallets, ready for transportation while newer outhouses and slaver accommodation had been built from rotten wood. They would all provide pretty good cover until I could blend in with the other slaves. Approaching the wall, scooting along below the small jutted side of the monorail tracks, I poked my head up to get a glance beneath me. Oh, that was high. Gulping hard, I cast my eyes across the intended landing area. It seemed to stretch out for a long fall. The scrap pile, covered by sheet corrugated metal and a few thick slabs of steel, bottomed out with old cardboard boxes only provided a small comfort against the drop. The metal could be slid on shore. And wet cardboard would slow me down. Right? My eyes glanced around, I had to time this right. Slavers were looking rather attentive with so many slaves out and about. None would be watching up here, they weren't anticipating any pony trying to break in. It took an achingly long time for them to seem to all be glancing the other way. Controlling my breathing, I leaned out. From the top of the control tower. No. Whimpering, I fell back again, trying to fight the imagery from my head. Things were bad, but that wasn't the way out. Not yet. Not yet. Sucking in breath, trying to force my aching lungs to operate properly, I let myself relax as best I could for a few seconds. On a tangent. I really hoped they had some rad way to steal in there. I could feel my throat clamping up under all the smog in the air out here. Not giving myself any more time to think bad thoughts, I turned, braced my hooves against the monorail side and hurled myself over toward the scrap. The wind of the fall rushed in my ears as I tried to roll and land on my side instead of my face. A shock of motion kicked up my rump as I felt my tail catch the barbed wire and slice a small chunk of hair out completely. The motion upturned me, leading me to land right on my back upon the sloped surface. Feeling the wind knocked clean out of me amongst a pained cough, I slid faster and faster across the sheet metal surfaces and bumped over thick rivets or girders. With one last stinging smack on my rump from the edge of the large corrugated piece, I was thrown into the wet and soggy boxes that collapsed surprisingly quietly around me. Oi! Who dropped something? I'll lave your knackers if you broke another box. Not quietly enough. Burrowing deeper, I covered myself in the boxes as I heard slaves scamper and avoid the stomping hooves of an overseer. I could hear him myself. His hooves had to be within 10 feet. I think something dropped off the monorail. Like a piece of metal breaking off? The hooves stamped closer, making wet splashes in the turned earth. Through the small gap below my hiding spot, I could see his shadow. Oh, please don't look in the boxes. Please, please. For 20 agonizing seconds, I could hear a small stick being prodded into the scrap pile. Each time closer. Then only a foot away. Come on, fruit punch. It'll just be another piece of scrap. That monorail's ready to go soon anyway. The stick retracted, but only after a few more seconds did I hear the slaver leave. Oh good. Just silent and safer now. Waiting for as long as I dared, I poked my head out through a hole in the boxes, seeing a dull grey earth pony trotting away towards the slaves. They seemed to be packing up, ready to carry their last shipment in. Slowly, I began pulling myself free and creeping low to the ground away from the box pile. I felt horribly vulnerable, relying on fruit punch not turning around. The moment I was close enough, I ducked behind the thin metal wall of a slaver's home to plan my next move. The slaves were taking boxes from just in front of this house toward a huge double door in the back of the ministry. On the other side, I could see a series of large doors opening to allow fully laden carts to exit toward the main gates, some sort of old loading area. Under the noise cover, I slipped forward again, making a quick darting gallop to dive behind a pallet of square metal cases. Oh, hello old friends. But where now? If I could catch up to the full procession, I could blend in with them like I had done at the mill long ago. Granted, that hadn't worked, but still. But there were too many slavers and bits of open ground between us. Damn. With my back pressed against the boxes, I heard the command shouted to fetch the next pallet. The slavers were making their way back. Poking my head out only led me to yank it back right away. Oh crap, they were coming this way. This wasn't a good plan, no not at all. Grab a box each, lift 'em and yar pansies. Fruit punch and I could take 3 each and you lot are stumbling and groaning over one? I overheard a slave mutter something quietly about them trying it while malnourished and sick. I could appreciate the thought. I'd never been able to lift these boxes even whilst empty. They were just far too large for me. Hell, I could probably fit in. Aha! As swift as I thought possible to stay silent, I turned and bit the lock, swinging it open and trying to prise up the lid with my hooves. Come on. Come on. Straining, I risked a little more noise to push harder. Already one slave had reached the opposite side of the pallet to watch over them. Faster slaves were beginning to drag the other boxes off the front of the pile. Almost tripping as it popped open, I set about swiftly dumping the various wires out behind me and covering them with earth before hopping up and falling head first into the box after wiggling my rear hooves in the air to give me enough momentum to get my back half up and in as well. The lid snapped shut above me to leave me in complete darkness eerily similar to that of the stable. Only with my full body curled and crushed into a tiny space. This time, I couldn't even dare turn on my pip-buck light. I simply had to sit quietly, still and try not to let the claustrophobic feelings sink in. Even a few seconds in it was proving difficult. The air was low in here, the smallest of gaps between lid and box providing just enough to survive by on my weakened lungs. But I couldn't keep this up long. My throat was getting hot from the effort as I had to fight to breathe properly. And the last one grabbed that too. A lurching loss of balance signaled the lifting of my box, followed by the strain and cry of the poor slave who would have my weight to pull this one journey as well as the box itself. With a dull thud and a shoot of pain through my spine at the impact, I felt myself dumped onto the cart before I was pulled slowly toward the ministry itself. In here, I had plenty of time to think. It was all I had to try and distract myself from the cramped conditions. Chief among them was, why was I doing this? Was it because I did want to help? Because I somehow found myself interested in the great stars of memories? Or was it simply because he had asked me? Even now, I still wasn't sure if I was choosing or simply obeying. The journey was, mercifully, not too long. 5 or so minutes filled with ringing shouts and wails of the slaves who took too long receiving canes or whips to their rumps and backs. I wished I knew how to activate voice recording on my pitbuck. The ponies outside the walls needed to hear this. If they could be made to realize the true horror of Philadelphia, perhaps something might be done about it. Trapped in this box, I had the most true-to-life audio filtering I had ever known as I simply heard Philadelphia. Before long, the trundling of the cart ceased and I felt my box being lifted with a smooth grace. Likely a strong telekinetic. Swinging across, the odd loss of gravity felt incredibly bizarre before I was harshly dropped the last 2 feet. The impact sent a jarring pain through my entire body, making my lungs spasm and my throat explode into a harsh coughing fit. The noise wasn't an issue, in here amongst the work outside. But I had no room to properly move. Each cough was like an inverse crush on my body as the small box kept it contained. I felt a trace amount of blood splatter on my own stomach before all balance and sense of direction fell out from under me due to the contained sound reverberating in my ears. Sniffing, whinnying softly in pain, I clutched my chest and shivered, praying that I could get out of this box soon. There was even a foul stench of mud, dirt and unwashed hair in here. Oh. That was me. Right. A small clunk sounded through the box. Wait. What was that? That it all off? Good, get back to the main chamber you lot, Master's gonna have a new job soon. Come on, stop limping back there. The sound of a few dozen ponies all leaving began to filter through the box, backed up by the heavier trot of the slavers as they followed and herded their stock. I spent a few minutes just listening, but all I heard were a few distant sounds of shouting and screaming. It was time to go. Pushing myself upwards, I exerted myself to press the lid open. To my horror, it didn't move. Oh no. No, no, not now. Do not do this. Pressing harder, thumping the back of my neck upwards or pressing with my head, I strained and strived. It moved. But it felt heavier than I had ever remembered. Suddenly, the realization began to filter through as to what that clunk from earlier was. So Mepony had put another one on top. Fear began to filter in. I was trapped in a tiny box, alone with no pony knowing I was here, with a gradually failing air supply. Eyes watering, I pushed again and again to no avail. Hyperventilating, my lungs burning and hooves shaking madly, I pushed with every ounce of strength my sick little body could spare. It was hopeless. I was trapped. Only fear of a worse fate kept me from screaming for help. Twisting, I turned on my pitbuck's light to gain any sort of vision, but all it did was heighten the pressing lack of space when I saw just how my body was twisted and contorted to fit in here. I panicked. Being trapped in here was not a fate I wanted, but stuck I began thrashing in sheer terror, driven to a maddened state as my eyes watered more and more. I don't want to die in here. So Mepony help me. Forget other fates. I needed help. Help! The shouting only echoed right back into my sore ears. I don't want to suffocate, Spasming again, my screams only led me to cough and hack painfully. But amidst it, I felt something rock the box from side to side. Sucking air as best I could, I tried to rock it again. And again. Building momentum, I realized the box above me was heavier than I was. If I could just make it rock from side to side. It took every bit of small courage I could to calm myself and keep rocking as I felt my mind begin to wander and darken. The lack of air was getting to me, I knew it. I couldn't pass out. If I did I might never wake up before my sickness got worse. Crying a shrill whine as loud as I could, I threw my body one way and then the other, feeling the thump as the boxes swayed and clumped down on their edges. Finally. Beautifully, I felt it overbalance and keel over both boxes, ejecting me onto a concrete floor in a dark room. Breathing in the musty air was like a dream, filling my lungs as I pushed my chest out and in a good few times. I simply lay on my side for a full minute, trying to stop my shivering and stretching my dead legs to regain the feeling in them. Eventually, my front legs fell back to cross over my chest. I hated this illness. Why? Why couldn't Samepony fix it? I just felt so weak and helpless amongst other ponies who were stronger, faster or tougher than myself. All I had were my dreams and the small measure of faith from the mare who had shown me that any pony, no matter how small, could take back their life. Yes. Yes, Murky. Think of her. Think of little Pip, your stable dweller. I tried to remember everything about her as I pushed my hooves beneath me. I had to cling on to those memories, those little stars of hope like her when she had risen to the skies above in the pit. Right. Right. Let's go. Opening my eyes, I found that the room was a large chamber next to the multitude of doors I had seen opening to let other ponies out with carts. Piles of boxes, crates and shelving units covered this side, while rows of carts were littered against the other. 3 exits left this room, one big and gaping toward a brightly illuminated area. The other 2 only dimly lit through small single doors. Staggering across, I tried to hear down each of them, but only the large entrance held any noise at all, that of many ponies laughing and screaming in dual succession. No. Not that door. The other 2 were silent, so picking one, I crept forward and tried to open it under the dim light. Darn. Locked. Shrugging, I made my way to the other one, finding the door already open anyway. Switching off my pip-buck light as the flickering white gem lights gave enough ambient light that my eyes could adjust normally in here, I trotted carefully inside. It led to a locker room, with 3 rows of the small metal cupboards cutting down the center of the room. Small benches were dotted here and there, mostly snapped and made of peeling paint by now. Glancing around to make sure no pony else was there, I pulled out Protégé's maps. It didn't take long to locate the huge warehouse on one floor. He had drawn a small purple circle on a higher floor and pointed to it with a few arrows. So that was likely where the sparkle spoofertizer was. Right. It looked like if I were to go through the back of this locker room and across the top of a big main room, I hoped I read it as gantries right, I would find the research areas. From there as was a simple run-through into what looked like a lab judging by all the tables. Okay. Simple. Stay to the shadows and creep. I could do that, right? It was easy to remember the directions, compared to the stable, I could trot this place no problem after a quick look at the maps. Right away it began to go wrong. Perking up, I felt my ears twitch as the sound of 2 ponies pushing and laughing came to light nearby. There was a door at the back of the locker room. They must have been coming in through there. Stuffing the maps back in, I rushed across to hide at the ends of one of the locker rows, glancing down the line at the door. Please just go past. They didn't. Staggering about, almost drunken looking, I saw a buck and a mare holding one another up almost fall through the door. The mare, a unicorn, still had a glass bottle held in her magic that they were both taking swigs from. I whipped my head back to hide. Maybe I could use the lockers to go around? Hey. Hey. Wanna use the showers? Could. Hick. Clean ya, if you know what I mean. The mare snorted before I heard the sound of hoof impacting with head. Well. That's what you get if you aren't Glimmerlight, I guessed. Huh. You're a good drinker but. Screw you. Why not arg fuck? A second, harder, sound had impacted. But the pair only laughed more. Clearly, this was some sort of running joke to the two slavers. A gurgle sounded another swig from the bottle, before I heard it clatter on the floor, empty. AWW. Hey hey. You don't do that. Hick. Ithro M. Watch. The sound of Somepony grabbing and grunting with effort was followed only by the blur of the bottle as it flew past my head and impacted on the wall, showering me with thick fragments of glass. I yelped in shock, before clamping a hoof over my mouth. Hot was that? Ymoargh fuck. The hardest hit yet denoted a return to thinking for the buck. I heard Somepony. Hey! Hey, come out. We can have SNRK. A threesome or something. I wasn't sure what horrified me more. The thought that I had been heard. Or the direction my traitorous imagination took. But I quickly had to pull myself to my senses and gently trot away down the other side of the lockers. If I could just reach the door. Already I heard them staggering down the other side, not a couple of feet away through the lockers. I almost leapt right off my hooves as I heard the mare scream. Peekaboo. She had reached the end. Oh crap. Oh crap, I needed to move. I upped my gait to a quiet canter, the door was still open. I'll go look this side, see if it was Somepony in the corridor fucking with us. I stopped dead. The mare was where I had just been and would no doubt look up here soon, but the buck was now looking back the way they had came toward the door. He'd see me if I ran out. Only one place to go. Hopping to the side, I reached the end and the tantalizingly close door and instead moved another row of lockers down and away from it to hide from both of them. Ducking behind the lockers, I cast a glance back toward the door as, true to my guess, I saw the buck wander up to it and glance out into the corridor. No pony here. And no pony down here either, replied the mare. Think we're hearing them ghosts they say are in here? War. PFFT. That was just once in the main office. Said he saw a fucking purple pony appear right before him. No pony listens to Theory Shaker anyway. Now I think we're just too fucking drunk, flank. Don't call me that. Me brother's the one with the shitty name. Arm firm blade now, got it? Now get over here. The buck, reading into that or not, didn't waste any time in staggering away. I concentrated on not letting the building cough sound out, swallowing it down and whimpering as quietly as I could when I felt all the colors around me seem to fade and sear across my hazy vision. Oh dear. This was getting worse. I needed to get this all done quickly before I was too sick to continue. Protégé likely didn't know how fast it could come on me. Pulling out to glance back down the middle row I had come up, I had to snap back as I saw the mare pass across it. I'd have to time this right, the moment she went by the last row I was now behind. I'd have to move back to the middle one. Then again to the one with the door before the buck saw me. On an unrelated point. I now had a headache. Watching the mare from the smallest amount I could expose, the moment she shifted past the opposite end of the row I moved. Then immediately dived and rolled toward the door as I saw the buck appear earlier than I'd thought behind her. Arm back. A sound of a hoof slapping something decidedly not a face echoed through the room, accompanied by a shocked, almost cute, squeak, then an impact that was upon a face hard enough to make the lockers shake as the buck no doubt fell against them, laughing himself silly. Much to my confusion. So was the mare. What an odd couple of slavers. Outside I found the corridor to be much better constructed than most, somewhat on the level of the Ministry of Image yesterday. It only made sense, I guessed. But here, multiple rows of colored stripes ran along the walls. Some turned down one corridor while others kept going past. Symbols were embossed at various intervals. Were they directions to things? One, the purple one, held the six-pointed star, while a red one bore the symbol of a small flame and a pony running away from it. but my attention was taken by the yellow one, bearing the butterfly symbol of healing. It pointed down the opposite way to my objective. But there was no way I was overlooking this opportunity. Already, my vision was swimming and my head fuzzing up as the ambient radiation built and made my chest feel thick. The corridors seemed oddly deserted. Weren't there dozens of slavers and almost 100 slaves in here? Where were they? Not that I was complaining, my weakening legs gave way to me slipping and falling back and forth just like the drunken ponies had. Perhaps I could blend in as a drunk? Squinting to get my vision to reassert from the blurring lights, I saw my destination up ahead, an open glass room bearing the symbol of Fluttershy. Almost collapsing in, I began scouring drawers and cabinets frantically, feeling my breath taking on a ragged tinge. The medical room was little more than a single raised bed surrounded by walls of cupboards and glass-lined cabinets. A couple of thin metal trays on wheels had been tipped over, spilling scalpels and empty syringes everywhere. Oh goddesses please, there has to be some. I threw aside small tubs of pills and bandages in my search, anything I didn't know got thrown on the floor as I went from cupboard to cupboard. Nothing. I searched the floor for any spilled sachets. Nothing. The drawers. Nothing. The bed, the bins and the cabinets above. Nothing. Collapsing against the bed, sucking air through clenched teeth as my chest ached and swelled in pain, I could feel the gurgle of blood in them. Was this wing of the ministry irradiated? It shouldn't have advanced this fast. Striving forward, I tugged at cabinets, climbing up onto the work surfaces to search them. It felt like Somepony had lifted everything valuable from here already, all that was left was worthless junk. That wasn't fair. Everything tumbled out, from clipboards to even a recorder. My hoof hit it as I stood on my hind legs to see into the top shelves. Click. Oh. My, is it working? Oh. Sorry. Did I just ruin the beginning? I'm so sorry, whoever's hearing this. Aha. My hooves found one cabinet locked shut. Through it, hidden to one side I could see an orange haze through the tilted glass. Unfortunately, no matter how hard I pulled, the lock wouldn't give. Don't worry, Miss Fluttershy, I'm sure they won't mind. Now, your train leaves in 1 hour, I suspect they'll wait for a ministry mayor. But we should get going. You really don't have to set up each one of these yourself, the staff who'll operate it are very capable. Sorry, Cherry, but I just can't bear to think I haven't helped out somehow. I don't really like just expecting Somepony else to do the job I want. I'll leave after I get this medicine cabinet all locked in. Ugh. Come on. Coughing so hard I fell upon the worktop, I cried aloud in pain as I fell into the sink, my side bashing off the tap on the way down. Wheezing, I looked around, there had to be something to prise the lock off with. They'd left me a message but I'd rather they left me the key. Of course, Miss Fluttershy. Now, the recording you wanted? Oh yes. My, I had almost forgotten, to whoever's listening, I'm so sorry. I heard Cherry cough into her hoof. I responded with a cough of my own before standing up on my hind legs to be in front of the glass again. Be strong, Murky. Like Brim. Oh goddesses Brim. I missed him. What I'd give for him to just throw me out of the way and headbutt this stupid glass or something. Right, well, I'm recording this for whoever comes along from the Ministry of Wartime Technology. Applejack very kindly sent me a gift, a bodyguard. But I'm so very sorry, I can't take him with me. He's just too loud. And he likes the idea of war a little much. So sorry, I mean it's nice and all just, he makes me so nervous. I'm leaving this for the engineer who's coming to set up the light, could you return this to the wartime hub, pretty please? I'm sure they'd like to have him back. Tell Applejack I'm sorry. The beaker smashed off the cabinet, as did the metal tray. Snorting, or at least, what passed for a snort from me, I grabbed a scalpel in my mouth and climbed back up. Miss Fluttershy, We really need to make tracks. There, now any of the little ponies who come to learn in the student wing won't get any nasty medicine they shouldn't have. Almost growling as I twisted and jammed the scalpel in the lock from between my teeth, I rattled it around. Yeah. Little ponies. Here's one little pony who really needed it, pretty please. That's wonderful, Miss Fluttershy. The voice held a small tinge of deadpan exasperation. Now let's get you to your train. I'll call a trotter's cab for us. Nothing else for it. This would hurt. A lot. I pulled back my hoof, ready to swing and smash it. But even more cuts were better than my lungs acting up. I almost fell as my head swam and my hooves felt weak again. I coughed a small metallic taste into my mouth. Spitting it out, a sickly colored blood fell from my mouth. No good, I had to try. Swinging forward, I smashed my left hoof as hard as I could into the glass and rebounded hard enough to catapult me completely off the worktop. Landing on the bed, it fell off its wheels to clatter onto the floor, dumping me against the cabinet. Moaning as the landing jarred my already sore torso from the convulsions, I looked up to see the glass defiantly intact. It was no good. Holding my head in my hooves, I struggled to think of some other way. Some manner in which I might get the one thing that would let me live another few hours. Thank you, Cherry. The sound of hooves trotting about played through the recorder. I heard the aide wandering away while Fluttershy seemed to stop and make a few scuffling noises. Oh, before I end this? Please, could you tell the scientists the key to the cabinet is under the welcome mat until they get a proper box? Thank you ever so much. Click. Slowly, bringing my crying face back out, I stared at the recorder a few seconds before launching myself to the long faded mat. Pulling it up, I expected everything bad. But there it was. Waiting to be discovered by any pony willing to actually listen to the past. Thank you. Flutters S. Shy. Ugh. Rolling over as another convulsion hit, I could feel my mouth aching and filling with splatters of my own fluids and blood. Driving myself forward that one more step, I pulled my sore body up to prise open the cabinet with a key, grab the sachet and nearly bite the end off in my rush to let that foul orange liquid save my life. Even now, she was still caring for ponies. Whether Vane wasn't as alone as he thought. Allowing myself a few minutes, I soon retraced my steps to continue on my route. The Radaway had soothed my throat, my lungs felt like they were slowly decreasing in pressure while my head was a little clearer. That wasn't the closest run I'd had, but somewhere, I had run into radiation without knowing it in here to set it off that badly. Moving on seemed like the best idea. Warily passing by the locker room door, hearing the two drunkards still shouting from within the cargo room, I advanced onwards, following the map. Very quickly, I envied the unicorn ability to hold something like a map up while trotting. Me? I had to stop and hide every corner or two to check I was headed in the right direction. Offices and fairly nondescript filing rooms lined this area. Possibly the lesser workers who dealt with import and export through the cargo areas. It certainly wasn't showing anything of the splendor I expected from a ministry hub. A hubbub of noise began to filter in through my ears. I was clearly drawing near to somewhere with a lot of ponies all talking and shouting. Music was playing too, some sort of Slava lounge. But there were too many voices, dozens upon dozens. Following my map, I cantered up some stairs, again wondering just why this portion was so deserted. I could see blankets and saddlebags left in these rooms, clearly accommodation for Slavs or overseers. But no pony was home at all. Another flight led me to a set of workshops. Benches with clamps across each side either lined the walls or were nailed to the floor in the middle. Again, nothing even vaguely magical here other than the lights. Wait. No. I dived below one of the benches, pulling a few toolkits in front of me. Seconds later, a galloping pony went by at a thundering pace, heading from up ahead to the stairs I had just come up. Slave or slaver I did not know. But only once they had passed did I pull myself out and continue. My heart was beating fast, Despite how quiet this area was, background noise not considered, I was still deep in a forbidden place. I could never forget that. If I were caught, if they discovered what I was, likely I wouldn't even get taken as a new slave. I'd seen trespassers brutally mocked, humiliated and exhibited to other slaves in the past. Often much to the amusement of the slaves themselves. Not for the first time, the sheer circle of brutality in Philadelphia never ceased to amaze me in rather morbid ways. The workshops held 5 or 6 doors to the right, all of them seemed to lead into the big room, where all the noise was coming from. Tentatively, I snuck forward to push one open, before hopping back as my hooves almost walked clean off the edge of a sudden drop. A big drop. Creeping forward, tentatively poking my head out, I saw a colossal room, 3 floors deep back to the ground floor. Ornate murals furnished every wall down to the ground where I saw a large space in front of a low wooden stage. Covering the back wall lay a simple curtain of half moth-eaten fabric. Arcing my head around I could see side rooms on the bottom floor, each containing small tables. Dotted here and there at various levels I saw other balconies or open corridors that allowed onlookers to gaze into the central hub of the, hub and watch whatever was taking place. In its heyday, this must have been beautiful. But now, slavers had stripped out every seat that must have lain before the stage, turning it into a solid floor. While the stage was lined with chicken wire mesh into large cages for slaves. Lines of foul banners and cloth were hung from balcony to balcony. The side rooms had been hollowed out into further containment for their workforce, sealing them in with nailed wooden barriers. Opposite the stage the slavers had set up a few wooden tables where some of them now all sat and bustled around, drinking heavily and laughing as they either played cards or whooped at the stage. I could see a scrawny, underfed and crying mare being forced into a humiliating routine as the slavers thumped their tables and screamed for more. Other slaves were lethargically dragging their hooves around to see to the needs of their masters between their work shifts. In the side rooms, I could see the vast majority of the bony slaves, trying to get what rest they could or glaring with no hope left in their eyes at the slavers that either sat at the tables or bustled around. In others, slavers sat with watchful eyes. There were a great many slaves simply left on the floor of the room, huddled in groups where they couldn't fit in the side rooms, as though the slave den was overpopulated. The majority of slavers not sat at the small tables were sitting against the walls or inside rooms, watching their stocks. Whips hanging ready. Many ponies came and went from side rooms, likely to their own accommodations. In all, the entire room seemed to bustle with activity and acted like a hub of, the hub. But worst. The gantries were gone. Before me I could see where they had been torn away, leaving my route inaccessible. I'd have to go down into that. Try to blend in as I passed by. I didn't want to. I really didn't want to. But something drove me to step back and trot back to the stairs after checking my map. I hoped with all my heart it was able to do and not simply a mindset to obey that forced me to go about the steps required to pass through such a place. If I tell you to go and fetch my fucking saddlebag then you fetch my fucking saddlebag whether it's your shift or not. The slave was slapped heavily across the face by the burly earth pony. Rushing back out of the entrance on 3 legs, clutching their bloodied nose in the other while I meekly trotted in past them. It was, unfortunately, the best way. There was no chance to sneak. I simply had to play the slave and stagger on through. Not that such a thing would be entirely impossible given I had at least gotten plenty of practice across my life. To that end, the moment I passed into the massive stage room I fell in alongside a group of weary slaves returning from a shift. I had hidden my pitbuck and goggles in my saddlebag to avoid drawing attention. Itching and sighing, the group around me made their slow path toward a spot on the floor where they collapsed. Unwilling to appear differently, I dropped with them onto my side upon the laminated wood. Truth be told, it wasn't entirely all acting that I was exhausted. Thirst was clawing at my throat. Radaway wasn't particularly known as a thirst quencher. Above us, the poor mare was being jeered to turn around and wiggle some more. I could see the roughly forced-on makeup staining from her tears. Often, the females really had it worst in these places, being such a subject to the often unrestricted lusts of the male slavers. This was only more proof as I saw the half-dozen or so slavers with their table whoop drunkenly. The slave beside me was softly crying herself, clearly worrying for her own safety. Had she been told she was next? If she hadn't been so deprived of cleanliness or food, she might have been fairly attractive. Philadelphia ruined all ponies, it seemed. As one dirty mass, we all simply lay together in a heap, with me praying that no pony recognized me as the Pegasus who had been dragged through the streets just a few days ago. If I could just slowly move from grouping to grouping, I could make my way to the far doors into the research areas. I began crawling as though hurt and tired, reaching for a fellow slave in the next cluster. A few other slaves were moving too, just stay average and forgettable. The whip cracked upon the ground. As one, all of us moving froze at the sound and turned to see the wiry unicorn stallion snarling. "Get in your groups and stop moving, all of you. You think this is a social gathering? Unless you're told, don't move." Squeaking in terror as I saw his eyes focus on me, I hopped quickly into the next group and cowered there, trying to pretend I'd always been from this one. The slaves roughly pushed me to the outskirts of the cluster, complaining and seeking more space for themselves. Eventually, I simply lay on the ground and shivered, hoping that no pony would really pay me any heed as just a small bundle on the floor. Already, the sheer noise and chatter of the slavers and the moaning of abused slaves was playing on my ears. A mare shrieked and begged as I saw a couple of slavers tug her off toward a curtained side room. Another buck wailed as he was whipped again and again for bumping into a slaver. Behind the mare on the stage, I could see similarly dressed mares and even a couple bucks cowering in the chicken wire cages. This entire place was a misery. I could see why Protégé hated it. A room that almost seemed to personify the day-to-day suffering of slaves. No extravagant tortures or cunning deceptions. Just deprivation and control. The reality of life for so many ponies in the wastes. I had seen the thousands of them across my life that had fallen out of control of their own lives. What would Sundial have thought of this? But against all wishes, I simply had to be a part of it. For now. I reminded myself. For now. Occasionally I would spot a few slavers less interested in the brutal side of their work, preferring to simply rest on the outskirts of the room between shifts. It wasn't unusual, some slavers were just taking it for the work, after all. If I could maybe go by them instead. Waiting for a procession of slaves to limp past, I gently slipped in among them, trotting with my head down toward the edges where less attention was focused. Up ahead I could see the thick door that led into the research areas swing open and closed as slavers barged in. At least it was open. Now I only had to. I was interrupted as I heard the rhythmic stomp and hiss of machinery actually moving toward the room. And emerge into the light. My mouth gaped as I saw what had to be the master of this area. I almost had to double-take as I rubbed my eyes and began looking higher and higher as I fought the urge to shriek on the spot. This was no pony. Standing on hind legs. A thick, dark brown-haired and muscular body drew up above them to a bovine head bearing two sharpened horns. At first I thought the behemoth was wearing armor, but very quickly, to my horror, I saw it was all implanted. Robotic-looking arms and embedded machined in its chest whirred away while one arm ended in a cybernetic hand. But the other. It bore a brutally large tri-fingered claw, giving the entire beast a lopsided gait from the immense weight. As it loomed above me, gazing into those rotating and red blinking eyes, I fought the urge to void myself in sheer terror. Below it walked an old donkey, limping on a stiff hind leg. Wait. The huge thing was following it? Was that some sort of insane half-robot bodyguard? Any thought further was killed immediately as I heard the voice of the pony the donkey was moving to meet. The bionic monster and the oddly authoritative donkey were bad enough to have to worry for, but that one voice overrode every thought had on the spot. Get out my way, you worms. Move. Shift's coming in and you're lazing about. Not over there, you wretch. Come here. His voice. The din died out as he rose above it all, my head slowly turning to see the sight I dreaded. Behind me, across the hall, strode the master. A thick crack sounded as I saw a bony buck being lashed by that heavy whip. Again and again for simply getting in the way, crying out in agony before being bucked away entirely. Know your place. Get inside, you lot. Think Grindstone's just going to want to wait? Around me, every slave present seemed to shift backward. I joined them. Why was he here now? Hide, I needed to hide. I wanted to scream in pain as I felt my head sear and throb around the scar. I simply fell amongst a group of complaining slaves who seemed too tired to properly shove me away. Behind him trooped a line of blackened and burned slaves carting crates and storage boxes. Most of them had dried blood covering their torsos, flanks and faces. They had been put through absolute hell. As soon as many were inside, they seemed to pass out on the spot. I couldn't even tell which were mares and which were bucks under it all. Even by my standards, these ponies were on the edge of life and ability. Crashing myself amongst a group of slaves, I didn't dare try to move for the nearby door now. He was too sharp. He would know. If he already didn't. Celestia, Luna, please lift me away from his wretched embrace. Chain-link shackles. If my old eyes don't deceive me. You're bringing me gifts, so I see? Your excursion went well? I see your personal stocks have grown as of late. The donkey's voice was very low, rich and surprisingly smooth. The master snorted, idly kicking a slave beneath him until he stood up again. You know the rules, Grindstone, you get what you catch. That breakout stunt you had your informant arrange by contacting the last rangers proved a lovely little way to get some of that upstart's little ponies into my hooves. In return, the remnants from the stable for your collection. But most of these slaves are just, well, appropriated from other slavers who don't want to dare say no to me. Give a little time. I'll have a full stock of my own to play with. Hee. The master glanced at the small donkey before him, then at the giant beast marching along behind its charge. A minotaur from Red Eye's technicians? Hey. You must have done something to please the big guy. Grindstone was already wandering amongst the crates, ignoring the chit-chat. He lifted horribly burned pieces of terminals and wires out before dropping them and nodding. Yes, this is good. Aurora Star's scientists went in there. Did you locate the information I asked for? HMPH. Nothing after the fire. If anything's there, it'll be on the terminals. It's all yours, Grindstone. Very well. Slaves. Take these to the storage room, now. Half of you get it. His own band of slavers got to kicking and prodding the tired workforce lying on the floor into activity, swapping over from the horribly maimed and hurt ponies that had come in with the master. I felt myself being pushed toward him, before fighting back to try and hide while moving away from him. I had to. He would recognize me instantly. Oh, this isn't good, not at all. If he saw me out here, I'd be his forever. Spurred by sheer fear, all too similar to when I had run from the fun farm, I more actively threw myself against the slaves moving the other way and galloped toward the next group too. The moment his gaze was averted, I made my moving, trying to simply gallop as fast as I could to the next group while all the slavers were busy with the changeover or watching the master. A couple more slow slides into each group and I was at the door. The slavers seemed distracted that one pony slipping out amongst the mass would go unnoticed. You! Every hoof ceased moving, locking me in place. Facing away, I felt my chest rapidly accelerate, my breathing in short and sharp gasps. Sweat and tears dripped off of my face in equal measure. My head stung. I didn't want to turn. But I had to. My master was calling. Every old instinct that seemed to re-emerge in his presence more than any pony save perhaps Red Eye himself. Slowly, my hooves twisted, turning me to face him. My heart felt a spike of hope as I saw it wasn't me he was looking at. But it broke the moment I saw who it was. Lying to the side, nursing a series of barely healed buckshot wounds on her side, covered in filth already with her brilliantly colored mane stained from smoke. Sunny days. The master strode over, pulling her up with a cry of pain, before immediately slapping her across the mouth with one of those massive bony hooves of his. I could see the fear in her eyes. The broken pride as I could see her mouth gently begging him. I felt the tears in my own eyes as I witnessed hers drip slowly, leaving clean lines through her sooty face. She had been so strong and weathered, when I met her. He had broken her so fast. You rest when I tell you. Not when you want. You earn sleep, not choose it. You've got plenty to go yet before I let you. Falling from my own hooves to hide, my jaw simply hanging open as my eyes simply kept streaming, I watched as she was hurled toward the door, thrown away from me and back into the mass of unlucky ponies whom had fallen into his will. She curled back, pulling herself away as I saw the master greedily licked his lips and chuckled. The donkey, Grindstone, simply stood and watched a show, thankfully being the one to gain the master's attention next. Sometimes, Shackles. You even scare an old vet like me. Good. The master snorted, tapping his cutie, Mark. It's my place in life to have ponies beneath me, at my every whim and command. Ever the born slaver you are. Well, you'll have enough to your whims soon enough. Come, follow, a room in private would be better to discuss certain matters of importance. Backpedaling, I almost screamed in intense terror. They were coming this way. Toward the door I wanted to go through with me between it and them. No, no, no. Turning, pushing myself to the floor, I crawled among slaves, disturbing those trying to sleep and inviting a few lightly bucked hooves into my side for the effort. I had to get there before them. I had to. Shackles, I see you don't have a, hey, pet with you. You always did used to have one. Looking back briefly, I saw the master raising a hoof, pulling up the empty collar attached via a chain to his armored barding. The smile became a fully fledged grin of sheer sadistic will. Oh. Believe me, my good Grindstone. I have some epony in mind. Soon. Very soon. Shivering, I fought the urge to wail and just gallop. The nightmare was here, the chains waiting to clamp home the moment he spotted me just hanging. It didn't take a genius to figure out who he wanted as his personal slave. The swinging collar was almost hypnotic before he dropped it again. A slaver lashed out as I hopped to another group. I had to bear the whip and stifle the cry of pain as I felt it open a welt on my neck. Shaking my hooves in apology, I heard him snort and leave. But the delay had cost me dearly, they were less than 20 feet behind me. A quick glance saw the master stopping to reach out and grab a young mare with a hoof. Clearly, he knew her from someplace beforehand, as I heard him taunting her on whether she was behaving. Grindstone and the master clearly had a long history. Right now, however, the unfortunate target of his attention gave me another window to push forward to the last slave group ahead of the doorway. There were no guards, presumably it being an entrance that slaves used just fine then if heading between work areas inside the hub itself. Reaching forward with a hoof to push through, I looked once again over the back of my body to see the master looking up. Squeaking in terror, I was forced to drop to the side of the door again. Don't see me, don't see me, don't see me. I'm so close, don't see me. A few slaves around me were staring at me strangely as I ducked back from the door. The horrible thought of even one recognizing me and shouting out was enough to make me avoid any and all glances. Pretending they didn't exist wouldn't help, but it at least cleared my head a little to push my back against the door while staying low. The moment he even looked away again to view Grindstone's slaves. Now. Grunting with the effort it took to power my wasted little legs into sudden motion, I slipped through the door in a single shove, kicking it closed with a back hoof as fast as I could. Line of sight broken, I clambered up and galloped for all I was worth down the straight corridor. Long rusted shut doors lined the walls, but I knew this led to some sort of large research room, hopefully with some sort of place to hide in until they passed by. Reaching a corner, I dived behind it just as the Master and Grindstone, with Minotaur in tag, passed in the corridor. You should know, I am moving forward with plans to increase my stock soon. You'll have an ally nearby amongst the slave masters, Grindstone. My own informant is taking care of preparations as we speak. You think you'll be promoted from overseer? I know your eventual ambitions, Shackles. Oh yes. I think you could say that. Hey. The thought of all those ponies, all mine, brings a little joy to my heart. If throwing them in a burning stable underground and locking the door till they're done is how you treat your stock, someone better help your new pet when you get him. Oh. Don't you worry, my old friend. No pony will be able to. That's the point. He's not like the others. Once I've got my chains around him, he'll be begging me to control his life. Crouched behind the corner up ahead, it took me a monumental effort to stifle tears of abject horror at knowing he was right and instead get moving again. The double doors up ahead to the search floors were hanging open as I scampered through and shut them behind me. Even a few seconds had proven the difference in the past, no reason to think it wouldn't happen again. Briefly, I considered shoving something against them, but that would only alert the couple. Instead, I turned to view the research floor. It was a very wide and low room, punctuated by steel tables, terminals and lots of measuring equipment. One entire wall was covered in musty books. While I saw larger machines made to obviously sit ponies in, helmets ready to accept horns ready, all against the back wall. Much of it I recognized from the stable, so much so that a familiar sense began overcoming me as I trotted quickly away from the door. So much so part of me almost wished I had another recorder to play and hear about what they had been doing here. I was not, however, alone. Almost startling me into shouting, I hear a long and drawn-out snort from Semepene's nose. Only after glancing to the left and right did I spot the one snoozing guard near a set of stairs on the far left of the wide lab. He had literally fallen forward on a desk, drooling across a faded folder in his sleep. Breathing out slowly, I kept myself facing away from him anyway behind the workbenches and desks scattered around in thick clusters for, presumably, differing projects. Each piece of equipment I passed had a small note stuck to it as well, perhaps telling Semepene what they were? It seemed strange this was so empty of activity, likely Grindstone simply didn't like ponies hanging around in an area where they were probably still organizing a lot of unknown equipment, lacking the scientists to understand it all. Was that why he wanted the information from the stable? The contrast between this silently preserved area stood out from the bustle of the main slave floor so hard that it almost felt like a different building. Like a different world. How might the scientists have toiled here, trying to better their understanding of preserving memory in these familiar machines? Everything they sought was to avoid the present-day nightmare I had just come from. Absent-mindedly, I found myself dropping a few of the more valuable-looking items such as little spark batteries and fancy wired things into my saddlebag. Protégé had wanted me to steal the sophomizer. I wasn't sure this was what he had in mind, but it didn't stop me anyway. While scouring the tabletops, I found a recorder. Well, in the stable they had recorded their daily lives and I knew that if I had to remember all the shanty stuff my little head would probably swell. I threw it in my saddlebag too, unwilling to make a noise by playing it in this dark and silent manufacturing place of the past with a sleeping guard present. Instead, I cantered onwards. I could see the door that would lead me to the storeroom at the far side, if my memory served me right for directions. Lined with brass on the door frame, it certainly looked important. It was locked. As was every other door to either side that exited the lab into the more specific research rooms. Shit. The Master and the Minotaur's hooves were very easy to discern, even at this distance through a door. I literally had only a few seconds to think, but everything in here was so practically designed or impossibly over-ornate in its design. There were no random storage containers or cupboards to simply hop inside, only open back desks and work trays amongst the machines. I began pacing on the spot, twisting to the right and left as my eyes scanned around. There were some spots, but it all held too much risk if they even went vaguely near it. The dim purple and blue gem lights didn't exactly help matters to blend, so Mepony as neutrally colored as me in either. Glancing to the side, one more set of stairs led upwards in an almost grand fashion. The one the sleeping slaver was, rather badly, guarding. Covered by a sheet of thin fabric that had been crudely nailed up to denote a no entry, it seemed to be the only way for me. The purple line on the walls that only now I realized I had been following this entire time led upwards from both sides of the room to there. The symbol of the six-pointed star hinting about where it led. I had no time to think or decide if this might end up just being worse. There were no other ways out of here. Silently, keeping my hooves light on the floor, I eased my way past the guard and slipped under the barrier to climb the stairs. Behind me, the lab door was thrown open rather too strongly with a sharp clang as it hit the wall on the other side. I was already long past his field of view, but by some oddity of life, the slaver did not wake up from it. Only after a few seconds I realized I felt sorry for him and what he was about to receive. Gently, I pulled myself past the doorway at the top of the stairs, pushing the heavy oak with both front hooves to move it. Ducking inside, I softly clicked it closed and waited on the spot with my head pressed against the door, not even daring to move to turn around and see where I even was. The bellowing and harsh words from the master at the guard were only matched by the roars and snarls of Grindstone's immense bodyguard. The guard was thoroughly grilled, possibly even beaten, judging by some hard sounds of impact. Every hate-filled word directed at the slaver made me quiver as the master took care of discipline duties for Grindstone. Even slavers weren't safe from him. No pony could trust any pony in this city, even Brimstone and Glimmer I had been unsure of at first. What kind of world was this? Shivering behind the door, even as I heard them leave the sniffing guard behind, I could only maintain quietly wishing to myself. I didn't want to be a slave. I didn't want to be in this city. In this world. It was just too brutal, too uncaring and harsh. The thought of a peaceful world of bright color and smiling faces was like a tease, given I knew it had once existed. I really wanted to go there. Finally turning, wiping my eyes, I looked upon the room I had entered. I was stuck here for now after all. Might as well see what was in it until I knew the master and Grindstone were far enough away. If the ministry was the body, and the workrooms its heart, this was its soul. Stretching high above me, a vertical office panned out to a colossal window that looked over what once had been the old park the high-rises had collapsed on. High library shelves lined the walls, almost seeming to angle inwards as they went up, to the point that I felt somewhat meek in the presence of such unreadable words bearing down upon me when I trotted in atop the soft purple carpet. Occasionally, shelves of defunct or dim memory orbs in holders interrupted the tomes, each with small notes taped onto them. On the floor before me lay that same symbol of the star, dyed into the fabric in a giant piece of wonderful art that I simply had to wander around rather than over, for fear of offending it. Slowly wandering forward, I couldn't help but feel small in the presence of the entire history of Equestria. Across the ceiling was a mural depicting the great goddesses themselves in half-arcs around one another. Framed pictures between racks of books depicted a grand castle upon a cliff, the 6 ministry mayors and a set of jewels with a crown in the middle. This entire room was like a nexus for all memory. The goddesses who remembered it, the mayors who defined the past, and the orbs and stars to preserve it. But sitting at the back, near the window, were 2 more immediate things to draw my attention. A desk and a large machine in the corner. The desk was light, thin and smooth, with a terminal sitting inactive at it. Strewn across the tabletop were scrawled notes and diagrams of complex machinery. One looked like the monstrosity that lay to my right. Thick, clunky and clearly patchworked out of 1,000 little parts on top of one another, even I could tell it wasn't mass-produced from the ties and thick tape that bound much of it together. No. This was hoof-made, piece by piece. In a strange way, it seemed to remind me of the machine I'd seen in the stable, given it was linked to a rather familiar-looking comfortable cushion chair with a headpiece hung over the back. Upon the seat was a small recorder. Around the bottom of the entire thing lay a whole host of memory orbs of both light green and shimmering cream. They were oddly bright compared to the dusty ones all over the shelves. This had to be the office of Aurora Star. I really wished Glimmerlight were with me. She would know what to make sense of from here, not to mention freak out at it all. Memory was her thing. But all the same, I couldn't deny my own curiosity here. Glancing toward the door, I reached out and plucked the recorder to insert into my pip-buck. Half muffling the speaker before hitting buttons, I finally found the one to play it. After a second, I instead slumped down into the machine's chair. Click. This is Aurora Star. Operating instructions for the memory projection and extractor unit will follow. Her voice was surprisingly young, somewhat nasal and with a habit of sniffing between sentences. I felt myself gasp at the mere idea though. This was the mare I'd heard so many mention, if only in passing. Another piece of the puzzle. It's really quite simple, I did design it as such. Well, apart from setting which memories to extract, leave that to the unicorns trained in the memory spells. Place the headset upon the brow of the user, whether for projection or extraction. Then, pull the red lever all the way down for projection or the blue lever halfway up for extraction. Just make sure you do it right. There's nothing worse than doing it wrong. Then forgetting that you did it wrong because you did it wrong and forgot what you did wrong. As a note, my headache was not exactly improving. Dull orbs are to be copied onto, lit ones are to project from, again make sure of that. Please, every time you are done place the light blue one back in. It's the original test orb with one of my own memories. I prefer them not to go missing to the press. Featherweight is rather good at tracking this sort of stuff down. Thanks. Click. Well, that was a grand whole 2 minutes spent waiting for a chance to move out of here. So began a period of waiting. I sat and watched out the window at slaves moving around below me or staring wistfully at the wall in the distance. I flicked open a few books, looking for the ones with pictures in them. They were all boring. I tried listening to see if the guards started snoring again. Nothing. I sat in her well-greased chair that could spin in circles. But eventually I could not keep my eyes from drifting back to that memory projection machine. I wanted out of this horrible world. I wanted a better Equestria. I also knew how to operate it now. The light blue memory was still embedded in a little holder, one of Aurora Star's. A little shining star of memories from a better world, just waiting for me to see the real Equestria. After my drawings and thoughts recently, after Protégé's talks, after the staple and the Ministry of Image, I could not do it. Yes, it was foolish, orbs made you unaware. But I just needed it. One little escape for a while, a brief trip to some place that wouldn't hurt me. Pulling off the headset from the chair, I lowered it atop my brow and pulled the red lever before wandering over to sit at the desk. Because why not? It was comfier than the machine's one. And span. As I heard the low throb and tingle of spark magic inside the machine, I had a distinctly unsettling feeling in my stomach. What? What if I woke up to see the master or a guard? They were right out there. This was a horrible idea. But handed the opportunity to leave my world behind for a few minutes or so, I could not turn it down. My perception of the world swam as I heard the machine gurgle and spark with magical energy. Then everything faded away. I was Aurora Star. She was trotting through the ministry in the early hours of morning, judging by the still slumped faces of those around her in the brightly lit corridors. She had a spring in her step, a saddlebag over her back by the feeling of it bouncing off my her sides. Upon my brow, a feeling of light pressure told of a thin set of glasses. They were way more comfortable than my goggles. I could swear it was easier to tell details. "Good morning, Miss Star." A pony waved as she passed. I felt my hoof lift to wave back, revealing Aurora's main coat to be a lavish ornate blue. "Good morning, Wheat Chief." The unicorn named Wheatsheaf trotted on past with a smile upon his face. Again and again there was that happy little polite mannerisms. I could get used to this. Miss Starr. Miss Starr. A young buck, likely an apprentice, ran up to me. I mean, her, well, me her. There was a term I never wanted to use again. I really hoped that being a mare in a few memory orbs wasn't going to affect me in real life. Barb already called me a filly. No. No. Forget my world, all Equestria now. I felt Aurora raise her head proud and reach to shake his hoof. Ponies were so polite. The young buck welcomed the gesture. Sparkler, what can I do for you? Nothing, Mom. I just thought you might like to know, you have a visitor. A pretty important one. She's in your office. Also, your morning coffee should be waiting. Figured I'd pick you one up while I was out anyway. My treat. I felt my eyebrows rise in interest, before she, he, she, me, I, whatever, I'll leave orbs to smart unicorns. Nodded thanks. Oh, thank you, Sparkle. How very kind of you. Now. I have a feeling I know who it is. Bowing their heads in goodbye, she wandered past him toward the office. Passing an inside balcony, she glanced down to see numerous ponies cheering together as one presented something on stage. I could not hope to understand the diagram projected onto the wall, but I felt Aurora smile warmly as the young mare was treated with respect and admiration by those trotting up to shake her hoof after the presentation. Compared to that same stage in my world. Finally trotting around and through another locked, in my version anyway, door, she came to the research lab, bustling with activity as ponies cast spells or recorded spells being cast. With a magical throw of her horn, the heavy door to her own room was gently pressed open. I wanted to shield my eyes as the light struck them. The office shone. Daylight, actual daylight blazed through the windows, reflecting off the glass to cast a shimmering glint into the room. Only now did it hit me that I had never seen the past as it should have been. Even Glimmerlight's memory had still been the Wasteland, but now Equestria was beautiful. The colors, the way all the little details that time had long scoured away now showed on the wood of the desk. The small gems that had once been in the goddess' eyes upon the mural were no longer stolen. The sounds of gentle wind and polite discussion from the labs behind Aurora while she wandered across a soft floor of thick carpet. That was before I even saw past the figure sitting at the desk to witness the outside. I wanted to take control, steer Aurora Star toward the window to gaze upon the vista that I only saw hints of behind the lavender pony that she was so intent on. Miss Twilight Sparkle, an honor to know you visit us so unexpectedly. Aurora's voice managed to rid itself of most of that nasal tone as she bowed her head slightly in greeting. The older unicorn looked up, tired eyes across a weary but strong face. Wait. I had seen her on the banners in the mall. She was a ministry mare. Sorry for taking your office, Aurora. I guess I just don't think too well without some books around me. I won't be here long, really, I just wanted to talk to you about a little something. I felt Aurora shake her head, revealing to me that she had a rather long mane by the way I felt a ponytail jiggle from side to side. No. Please, ma'am, it is all right. I'm just the same, really. Was she nervous? I could feel sweat running down my face, not just from the more natural heat that drifted throughout the room from the windows. Twilight smiled thinly at the mare. Clearly younger than her, standing up and beckoning her over to the machine I had just used. I wanted to talk to you about your projection machine. Now, I know it's been your own little pursuit for the past year, but I'm afraid it's no longer necessary to provide funding for mass production. I felt Aurora step back in shock, moving over to place a hoof upon the machine protectively. But Mom, this is my biggest project. To allow non-unicorns to see and store memories. I thought the ministries were all on board. I'm sorry, Aurora. But we've had a breakthrough. something called a recollector that works with a separate concept called the black opal. Essentially, it does the same thing your machine does, by letting any pony access or withdraw memories but in a much more portable form. I'm so sorry. But in these days we need to prioritize the ones that will have a greater overall effort to the war. She did sound genuinely upset to have to break this news, moving over to lay a hoof on Aurora's shoulder. You've been an incredible leader of the Philadelphia hub, Aurora. You will continue to be. The papers you wrote, about using memories to educate ponies? That could be a wonderful tool to let all sorts of ponies learn about things they normally wouldn't. After all, we both know how few ponies actually know about Starswirl the Bearded, right? The older mare's smile was met by a little chuckle from Aurora Star, clearly a little in-joke between the two of them. But I could feel her shoulders slump as Twilight led her to the window overlooking the park. I would have felt finally elated. Had it not felt disrespectful to Aurora having one of her projects canned after, presumably, a long period of work and effort. All the same, Philadelphia was not the city I recognized. The park was green. Gently flowing trees surrounded a bright blue pond at its middle where little winged creatures were being fed by ponies. The high-rise building was intact beside it, annoyingly blocking the view to the mall. But just to see the streets clear and home to so many ponies, the skies filled with Pegasus that twirled to and fro. Never in my wildest imaginations could it have looked so amazing. Ma'am, do you mind if I ask you something a little personal? I'm sorry, it's hard to speak to the staff about this and you've been such a wonderful mentor for me. Of course, Aurora. Believe me. I know what it's like to need one. Do you ever think that it's wrong to be making all this technology to go into a war effort? I didn't imagine this when I was small and wanted to be a scientist. I wanted to help everyone, not just every pony. So did I at that age. The world is changing, all we can do is hope we invent the right things to stop the change from going too far. I'm never sure how Applejack and Rainbow Dash manage it, developing or doing the things they do. Some days I fear I may have to start doing something similar if things get bad enough. But don't worry for the future, Aurora. You're a pony of the past, despite your age. Look at where we've come from. The world you wanted when you were a foal, and just do all you can to preserve and maintain that, all right? Yes, ma'am. Please, Aurora. We're friends. It's Twilight. My head turned to see Twilight offering a rather adorable little smile, even for her more advanced age. My own mouth's corners twisted upward too. Yes, Twilight. Thank you. I won't disappoint you. But, I do have something. Oh yes, Twilight chuckled as she spoke, I think I know what. All the other ministry leaders have been mentioning you've been getting in touch with them. Very canny business thinking. Come on, show me. Aurora was clearly blushing at her superior knowing ahead of time, but she turned to pull a lavender orb toward her, the same color as Twilight. In fact, I could swear the darker purple sparkles within it seemed to match her main color too. It was slightly bigger than a normal memory orb and glowed when Twilight herself plucked it from the air with her own telekinesis with an ease not even Protégé had. Against the direct sunlight, the orb almost seemed to absorb some of the light in its strange glass-like surface. It's got my magical signature. Yes, Ma. Twilight. They have to be created using a memory orb from the pony intending to use it, which is why I asked for one from each of you last year. It's not a very efficient process. But it's just a proof of concept. This orb will actually display as an image to whoever activates it once you record something on it. It lets you basically make a message that includes you and your expression too. To play them back, you just place them on the holder they come with, so any pony can view it. Aurora. This is wonderful, I wish we had things like this back when I was just a student sending messages every week. Well, it's yours. The messages can be so personal with this sort of thing, but they're one use only so. If you want to record something, Make sure it's important, I can't create them easily. Also, you have to leave this one with me afterwards. I promise I won't look, but I need to have a model with me to help in creating more. I'll mail it back to you the moment I've worked out how, though. I promise I won't look at the contents. It's your message from the heart to the ponies of the future. Twilight seemed transfixed by the message, only nodding vaguely in response while rubbing a hoof along it before pulling the orb close. I saw a little glint in her eyes. Not happiness, at odds with everything else. I think I know precisely what to say in it. Recorders just don't feel right to me, and memory orbs. Well, it feels strange to talk to a mirror. But this. Yes, there are a few things I wanted to say. I'll have it back to you before the end of the day, Aurora. Thank you. They hugged briefly, with me rather enjoying the small measure of physical comfort even for just a memory. Twilight gave her polite goodbyes and departed, leaving Aurora to look over the vista of Philadelphia once again from her chair. Kites were flying in the park, while even the factories in the distance seemed cleaner and part of the scenery. A wonderfully serene image of the world before it all. Gradually, I felt the corners of my perception darkening. The memory was ending. No. Not yet. This world was happy. I wanted to go to the park. To trot the streets. I wanted to see the sun. I didn't want to leave Equestria. Despite all internal pleading, everything began to slide away. I wanted to stay so badly. Slowly. That world faded, falling apart through the blur and haze of the orb's memory, ending to reveal the desecrated corpse of a city that had been risen from its death by red-eye. Colors withdrew to thick black and scalding red, and the park was once again buried beneath a mountain of rubble, the kites fading into nothing. Factory smoke became like volcano ash, belching forth into the sky that was hidden by the clouds once again. The return to reality was as harsh as I might have imagined. Sitting in Aurora's chair, I simply hung limply for a while, not even crying. I just stared. I wanted to go back. Wanted every dream to be filled with that place. Slowly, I gradually pulled the headset off and let it drop by my side. Turning my head, I saw the purple orb still sitting there beside its holder. I couldn't live in that world. But I could let their wish of the message coming to those of us in the future they dreaded come true. Slipping off the chair, I picked it up in my hooves, seeing the magic within surge and twist in arcane shapes. This was no normal memory orb. The radiance from it recolored my own coat when held near me, while the sheen on it had gathered no dust at all, to the point I could see my gaunt face in it. Without much ceremony, I placed it upon the holder. A sharp but soft magical crack snapped through the air and my ears as it made contact. Sparkles whizzed free from the orb, orbiting it at high speed. Stepping back quickly, I could only gaze with an open mouth as I saw the stars flow faster and faster in all directions around the central orb as its light grew and grew. Sucking air, the sparkles flew inwards as the entire orb gleamed. Colors danced around it. Before they began to form and flow together, I saw lines. Lines became curves. Curves became shapes. Shapes. The Ministry Mare, Twilight Sparkle, came to life before my eyes. Standing in front of the desk, she faced toward me. Her body was somewhat translucent, twinkling from little stars that drifted lazily from side to side in place as they helped make up the shape of this legendary pony. A star shape like a skeleton projecting the body around each dot of light. She was taller than me, properly fed and healthy, if tired-looking. In her eyes hung a weariness that she had either not had or kept hidden from Aurora. I don't know who you are or where you found this, nor how long has passed since I recorded it. Aurora Star has promised that they do not break easily. So this could be as far as I might imagine into the future. So please, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Twilight Sparkle. I am one of the 6 ministry mares under Princess Luna of Equestria. A land of peace, optimism and hope. Or at least, it used to be. She glanced to the side, away from my perspective had I been directly before her. I began to worry about the volume for the guard. But if he hadn't been attracted by the first spark, likely the door was blocking the sound. I shifted forward, standing right in front of the Twilight illusion. We have entered into a war. A horrible war against the zebras that is consuming our entire civilization. I am not here to tell of the reasons or the morality. Because I do not want to attempt to rationalize or justify what should not be happening. We of the ministries are sworn to find a way to preserve and protect Equestria, to end the war however we might in order to help bring peace again. But I take to this orb not to tell of how we are succeeding, but of how I fear we may have already failed. A part of me went out to the poor mare. I could see the hurt on her face as she spoke the last line. A ministry mare should never say these things. We are to remain steadfast and promote victory without thought of failure. But I cannot permit this time to pass without some record of my true thoughts and feelings. I am a pony first, a leader second. This. Sorry. Twilight looked away, raising a hoof to her eyes. This was hard for her. It seemed only natural to me to talk about the world. But this was a mare who had grown up with a peaceful realm to love and enjoy. I come to this orb to get this out. I need to. Equestria is not what it once was. We are not only losing countless lives against the zebras, we are losing who we are. When did we become about aggressive victory? I had seen great darkness and chaos overcome with friendship. Savage greed and hateful intent beaten by love. But now victory and defeat comes only at the end of a weapon. This isn't the Equestria I grew up with. My heart broke. She was crying. My hooves felt itchy on the ground, unable to do anything but simply listen. Twilight looked back toward me, or slightly above me, anyway, with tearful eyes. There was nothing. Nothing but me and her in the room. The broken past speaking to the ruined future. When I was a student in Ponyville, all I had were my friends and the love of my world. We could leave our doors unlocked, trust one another to help out and gladly offer up our time to aid a pony in need. We played, learned and loved in the light of a brilliant sun, sleeping soundly and safely beneath the beautiful moon. The worst I had to worry about day to day was getting a report done on time. Such innocent days. That world is gone. So far that I am not even sure this is Equestria anymore that I'm trying to save. Breathing sharply, she seemed to scuff her hooves on the ground, looking away again until she could compose herself. I dearly wished I could hug her. But my hooves I knew would only pass through. Her voice grew and grew, pain and hurt expanding upon every sentence. Today on HGN. Sorry. Today on the train. I heard a group of young colts swearing and insulting others. I passed ponies drunk and screaming, war veterans staggering and horribly maimed and others suffering from the stress of war. We own weapons in our homes that can kill in seconds while our own ministries are spying upon each other. One of my best friends is a drug addict. What happened to my world? I owe Celestia. I'm sorry. She had slumped, falling to all her knees and hiding her face as I saw little sparks of magic simulate even the tears dropping to shimmer and disappear on the ground. I was shivering myself. Real tears forming in my eyes for her. I had lived in this world my entire life. She had to watch the one she loved become the hell I knew. In history. Other civilizations were born in the fires of war, in pain and in turmoil. We were born through understanding, love and friendship. We strayed from the path we had set for ourselves not by hate or choice, but through the ignorance of our own innocence. We were foals playing with the tools of our parents, the parents who had not taught us the responsibility we needed to know why we should never play with them at all. Another sad pause. Twilight looked up again, twinkling eyes staring right at mine from her lower height while kneeling. I'm so far from the Equestria I knew. I just want to wake up tomorrow and be in my bed in the library. To nag Spike for oversleeping and see my friends outside in the sun. To visit Cigar Cube Corner for a snack or go to meet Fluttershy for lunch. Why can't we just go back to what we once had? if this doesn't end well. I'm so sorry to whoever is listening to this. With things escalating and mega-spills coming into being, I don't even know what's going to happen. The thought that someday all the good might have been squeezed out of Equestria scares me, that there might not be any good ponies left. Just corrupted elements as I see around me now. All I know is I have to find a way to stop or at best repair my world and hope Samepony might be willing to do it. We're trying. I barely breathed the words. She had stood again, pacing in place. But Twilight stopped, looking directly ahead. I know whoever you are, this must feel like you're the unluckiest pony in the world right now, should this war pan out the way I fear it could. Ponies aren't meant to live in horror and pain. Please. Don't forget where we came from. That's what matters, because there is always a way back. I'm going to find it. All I can say is we're so sorry. She stretched her hoof forward, almost looking confused why she did. Raising my own, I pressed it toward hers until the light sparkled around the end of my own leg from touching the ambient magic. Her sparkling lavender clean hoof of the beautiful past passing into the bandage-bound, blood-stained hoof of my future. Stay true to the elements that made us what we were. Never surrender to the hate. I know your world may not be perfect. But Equestria is only what we create. Make friends, take time to make amends, do not be afraid to fight if in defense of a better world. This message is to let you see from me the thoughts and fears of every pony now. We're all dreaming of the same peace, even if we don't know it. Good luck. With that, the little stars shimmered and whirled as the entire image collapsed into a shining mass that flooded into the orb, leaving me alone in the dark. Alone in a silent new world. A million miles from the true Equestria she had known. Somehow. I felt both more convicted to escape than ever. And further from freedom than I had known my entire life. I had sat staring at the orb some time, listening as I heard the guard grumbling to himself downstairs about being tired. It felt odd, knowing he was so close to me still after all I had seen and done inside the very room he was trying to keep others out of. Twilight's memory had hit me hard. They were hoping in the past that their world wouldn't fall into the abyss they saw coming. Their hopes had been almost entirely dashed. Now it was up to ponies like Little Pip and all those others Pon 3 talked about on the radio. All separate across every area of Equestria, all striving for the same thing. I really wished I could ever be like them. Traveling the wastes and trying to make things better. But I wasn't. Eventually, I slipped the orb into my bag. It was surprisingly light for its larger size but my bag was beginning to get a little full. Pulling the straps across, I placed it back atop my torso and snuck back over to the doorway. The past had opened its wonders to my eyes, literally this time, but I could not linger anymore. I needed to get out, get that Sardonita and get back to Protégé and Glimmerlight where I could draw and just make sense of all this. I had to push my wishes to be someplace else away, lest they overload my mind with rampant emotions or feelings of isolation of being born 200 years too late to be a nice pony. Pressing my ear against the door revealed the guard was trotting around, likely to keep himself awake. That was good, I could use that gap to get out the door. Gently pressing it aside, I only cast one last look back at the office. This place was important in ways I could not fathom. If only I could come back and remember more sometime. The guard was at the far side of the lab, far enough away that I managed to creep down and slip behind the workbenches and stay low to the ground. Listening to his direction, I crept around the tables, hopping from one to one only as the guard wandered past my position. Although he was a good 15 feet away in the wide room, there was no sense in taking chances now. Fucking shackles. Thought we were rid of him. The guard was muttering to himself. Had the master worked as an overseer here too? It did make sense to think about. Waiting at the next corner until the guard wandered back towards his chair, I poked my head out to check on where his head was looking, pulling back immediate once I saw his neck twitch to look over the top of everything. Shivering from even that simple close call. I waited till I heard trotting again before moving on. Approaching the door, I lightly tested it with a hoof first, finding it swinging easily. Good. That wouldn't be a problem to jump through. Wow. I really could do this whole sneak thing. Well, sort of. I still was only going in traditionally, it was while getting out of places I tended to slip up. Watching the guard's hooves beneath the benches and desks, I slipped through the doors the moment I saw him turn away. Beyond was a thin corridor that split into a two-sided junction at the end. Trotting forward, I found that each direction curved away around a smooth corner. Doors lined the outside wall while the inside one had various windows. Creeping up to one, I saw that the curves must have met at the other side. This was a single large test chamber surrounded by one circular corridor. It was well lit and contained a very valuable-looking piece of machinery at the center, like a large bowl connected to the ceiling with pipes and wires. It was very shiny. And very complex as such. I ignored it. With only one way in and no hiding places, even some shiny things had to get overlooked from my rather grab-happy mindset in a place where I felt the slavers deserve nothing. No. My objective was the room on the far side. Trotting around, I saw that it held no door. Within was exactly the place I had wanted, a large storage chamber used for old machines and prototypes. Piled scrap lay on either side of the entryway, while a rack of shelves around a wall table bore a whole ton of weird and wacky designs. Most were rusted or cracked. In the far corner, I saw a few old robots lying dead against the wall. They were big and boxy with large screens where I might have imagined their chests were. It all tapered down past two weapon mounts and two arms to end in a single wheel at the bottom. No wonder they were junked, how could that ever work? But the storage chamber was dominated by a colossal machine. What was worse? I recognized some elements of it. Pods, just like the zebra pony ghoul cult had been using to zombify ponies. They were arranged out here as well. In a space ring around a central tower of humming magic and blinking lights. There was so many inside one. Checking behind me, I trotted forward into the oddly sparse room, concentrated only around this. I could see out of the corner of my eye a table that held the shape of the Seine and Anita. But this felt more important. A young buck, an earth pony with a soft red mane, light grey coat and perhaps only a few years older than I was. Sleeping? He was unclothed, just lying with a slightly open mouth while breathing gently. The pod had closed around him, bathing him in a bright white light. His pod hummed louder than the others while I could see a cluster of memory orbs atop the machine that pulsed and glowed. What was this? A control panel flickered between two pods. I cast a gaze at it, seeing one pod on the diagram lit in a flickering yellow while the others were an almost invisible blue against the background. Text continually scrolled. Paused. Then repeated the same shapes again. My eyes kept flicking back to the buck serenely lying there. Was this a slave forced in? A slaver volunteer? No. This was way beyond my capability. Just get the sanitizer and go. Yes. Turning, I grabbed a strap hooked around the single box marked with a six-pointed star in my mouth and lifted it from the table. Now just to. The sound of moving scrap entered my mind from behind. Something was powering up. Something big. Oh no. Dreading to turn, I found myself rushed by one of the machines. It had powered on, two weapon limbs and two clawed arms firing from that boxy torso while the screen flickered on to show an angered pony in gilded armor. Above it, those two flashing lights on the top of the carapace flared in red circles. The wheel spat and span as it tried to gain purchase to stand, and why wasn't I running for my life yet? Good advice. I turned and galloped for the door. You will halt and stand, cowardly thief. A whirring was my only warning before I screamed and felt claws clamp around my torso. It could extend its arms? Yes. Struggling, dropping the selenitufa, I saw that one of those long tubular arms had shot out to grab and lift me up. The voice was loud, booming and shook through all the corridors and halls around me. My ears seared with pain as my headache thudded on every syllable of the robot's voice. I wasn't stealing. A lie most foul. You will kindly accept being held across the room in punishment? What? It wasn't kidding, the sheer confusion was all that gave me reason to not panic before gravity inverted for me and I slammed against one of the shelving units. Now I panicked, already howling in pain as my right hoof slapped against the wall and my battered torso flared in pain down both sides. Scrambling on 3 hooves away from the machine, I waved my one good hoof toward it, begging profusely. Don't. I'll give it back, I'm sorry. To remove war property is of the highest treason. You shall suffer the messy removal of your head. Followed shortly by a brief prison sentence. No. Oh yes. Standing atop its one wheel, the colossal machine aimed its short-barreled Gatling cannon toward my face, along with the quad-barreled energy cannon on the other side. Both arms clacked their claws together menacingly as it began to wheel forward. Retreating further, I found myself cornered. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Please, just don't kill me. Don't. There was no way out. I saw the Gatling cannon spin up as one arm raised to crush down. Terror bled through every fiber of my being, I simply screamed and hid my eyes. My throat catching, I simply couldn't even scream louder. It just evolved into the longest and most pathetic whimpering squeak I had ever made in my entire life. I heard the weapon cease moving. Wait! Standing back up fully, the robot held itself still, the face changing to that of a puzzled unicorn. I heard a warbling of something being rewound, before I heard all sorts of moans, groans and shouts. Eventually, I heard my own squeak played back. Was I really that whiny sounding? And then shortly, an eerily similar one. There is only one squeak I know of so pathetic. Salutations and great joy to my warmongering heart. Miss Fluttershy. It is good to see you again. Before I could even respond, I felt myself being picked up again and flung over one hard metal shoulder and then the other. The screen had changed to a delighted full. Huh? As I promised, I have awaited your return with bated breath and safety's all off. Is it time for us to go to war, Miss Fluttershy? I do so look forward to giving the striped menace a sound good thrashing. It thought I was a ministry mayor? Wait. It thought I was a mayor? Oh come on. But I'm no. I mentally bucked myself as I realized I was currently being held by a giant robot with at least 4 methods to kill me whose only reason not to was mistaking me for a 200-year dead mare because I squeaked when scared. This was not the time to correct him. No, I was just coming to collect something. You're doing a very good job though. A very loud job. This is my product line's factory settings for the battlefield, Miss Fluttershy. To offer a firm tone to let them know we are not simply here for crumpets and tea. We aren't on a battlefield. The screen changed back to the puzzled unicorn again. Oh. Is this a more sufficient volume for thine ears, Miss Fluttershy? Please forgive me, I simply wish to express my unbridled joy at your return after all this time. I was most upset when told I could not accompany you as your bodyguard, but I have instead taken the time to guard the room you asked me to. Rubbing my ears, this was slightly better. But every word was like a clip across my skull. This was one weird machine, guarding one room for 200 years. Somehow, despite it trying to kill me, I couldn't help but find it such an unbearably lonely thought. Had Fluttershy ordered it to guard a pointless room just to get away from him and these warlike tendencies? Hey! What the fuck is all the noise in here, you stupid machine? The guard from the labs had galloped in, baton hanging ready around his neck to grab in his mouth. Entering the door, he found me much closer. And simply stared for a second before scowling and advancing. And you? What the hell do you think you're doing in here, stealing? We got a good punishment in these here den for thieves. Can't proper sneak if you're missing a hoof now, can you? Smear. I yelped as the larger pony dived forward, grabbing and pulling me to the ground. The baton swung, cracking off my skull with enough force to knock me back into the ground and hit it again. The double impact reverberated in my skull, painful and making my still healing forehead welt and throb in abject agony. I didn't even know if I screamed or not, but I felt him pulling my hoof out, reaching into his bag for. Oh God, this is a knife. The memory of a knife stabbing into my shoulder was all too fresh, too horrible to think about. The penetrating cold metal rending my flesh. Come here, you wretched rapscallion. You will unhoof Miss Fluttershy immediately. Suddenly, the weight of a slaver disappeared, forcing open an eye. I saw him being lifted, snarling and swinging his baton at the robot's arm. To no effect. Let go of me, you old scrap pile. He isn't. Silence. The penalty for assaulting a ministry mayor is a temporary ban from oxygen for 1 year. The robot shut him up rather forcibly. I saw the claws clamp closed hard enough to crush his neck. Only a disgusting gurgle emerged from his mouth. While the eyes went wide. The robot's screen displayed an angered armored guard, the lights flaring red. But because it was Miss Fluttershy, one shall add an energy spanking too. With a twist and a whine of pistons, the slaver was sent flying into the wall. Whirring, the quad energy cannon powered up and blasted him into nothing but dust, with a lingering pain gurgle being the only remainder. I stared at the pile of ash, finding it drifting all through the still air. Some of it landed on me. Scrambling, even past pain, I fought to clean myself of him. I was covered in pony. Further into the facility, I heard the shouts of dozens of slavers. Gunfire wasn't going to go unnoticed. Hearing commands shouted, I broke myself from the horror, turning to the robot. What did you have to shoot him like that for? My sincere apologies, Miss Fluttershy. If I'd known you'd have preferred the rockets. Well, I still could if you really want me to. Its shoulder popped open, revealing a dozen miniature warheads. I sat back, waving my front hooves before holding my head again in pain. No, no. No missiles. Please. I need to get out of here. Zebra infiltrators are disguised in here and might try to kill me. Then I shall protect you. That is my grand mission. Wincing, I cowered below him until my ears stopped ringing. Already, I could hear hooves running all over the nearby rooms and floors. We didn't have much time. The master was still in the building, I just knew it. He'd be coming. Coming to take me back again. Thank you. I think. But please, I don't want to kill ponies. I mean, zebras. This long and you don't change one bit, ma'am, enough to make a warmongering robot like me blow a circuit in confusion. What isn't there to love about the grand art of war? Right. Right. What is your designer? Name? Mr. Peace. Go figure. Hopping up on its one wheel, the multi-limbed machine raised the quad cannon to scratch its head. Forgive me, Miss Fluttershy, but did I not make such an impression on you before to remember my illustrious name? I did think we got on charmingly. But I am most capable of continuing to defend this machine should you require me to stay behind once again. Well. Perhaps he could be just what I needed to save my life and get out of here. We needed to go now, but perhaps it was the immensely armed killing machine that regarded itself my sworn protector. I simply had to ask. Turning to the massive device with a buck on it, I pointed with a hoof before scooping up the sparkle satin galing. Mr. Peace. What is this machine? It? Turned back to the pods with the memory orbs at the center. He seemed to stare at the buck inside. This is something that Miss Starr was putting together. I'm a warbot, not a scientist, so I couldn't tell you exactly what it does. All I know is that Buck has been in there as long as I have stood guard and that the new mule in the ministry keeps saying that it doesn't work anymore. Truthfully, Miss Fluttershy. If you had any questions about war machines or the best way to extract a zebra's diaphragm, I could help, but this is rather out of my specialist area, I'm afraid. He had been in there since before the war? Pressing close to the glass, I watched his blank sleep. Just dreaming. My own body lit from the white light flushed across his thin body. I couldn't help but wonder who was really more trapped between him and I. Miss Fluttershy, if we are to get you out, we should go. Hostile intent signals are approaching. Or should I go and cheerfully say hello? He hefted the Gatling cannon while I turned back and threw on my saddlebag. Al. All right. Yes, it was time to go and get back to Protégé. There were too many secrets and mysteries in the depths of this ministry's past. But, you need to be quieter. Please. Oh. But I like being loud, Miss Fluttershy. It strikes terror into the hearts of the most impolite enemy. But if I must. You, so much better on my ears. But the slump of his bulky shoulders and the disappointed earth pony on his screen almost made me feel guilty. Galloping across, I listened from the doorway. Hooves were thumping all over the research labs. Likely organizing a team to rush in and check. Do you know a way back to the big cargo place in here, Mr. Peace? Oh, of course, ma'am, this way. He rolled past me, weapons pointed, heading for a side door away from the circular corridor. This whole ma'am thing was beginning to irk me. Honestly, I was a buck. I liked mares and everything. What did I have to do to get a bit of masculine approval in my life? There was a sudden ripping crack of wood. I leapt a good foot from the floor, shrieking at a filly-like high pitch. Mr. Peace stood before me with the door entirely separated from the frame. The perplexed unicorn on the screen looked at the ruined door in his hand. I should see the engineers about this. I believe it needs some oil. Galloping past him, I ran into the corridor beyond, hearing Mr. Peace rolling after me. This was leading us through many documentation offices. Even I could tell that, no pony would ever work with that many filing cabinets and stay sane in anything else. Mr. Peace directed me, shouting directions as we dropped flight after flight. Eventually, the activity lessened out as we passed into a more deserted area of the hub. I hoped it wasn't due to more radiation. We slowed, no sense in galloping about madly when I could sneak. Mr. Peace was fairly quiet when he wasn't talking, just a low hum and the soft trundle of his singular wheel. Despite the attitude, he certainly did obey instruction. But away from the immediate rush, well. I hoped. I stopped to get my breath and hold my aching shoulder and chest. The robot remained protective, watching corridors above me. Mr. Peace, what's the last thing you remember about me? Some time ago, ma'am, to be precise, 525,600. Just what it is, I mean. Oh, well, I was seeing you and your friend away from the ministry after visiting Miss Starr's office, of course. Why, is there something in particular? Really, I hadn't known why I asked. But the poor robot being abandoned just struck a nerve. I hoped she'd at least say goodbye. Alert. Hostile targets detected within flutter guard range. I heard them too, a group of hooves coming from roughly the same direction we had. In the long corridors around thick murky internal windows to research rooms, the sound echoed everywhere. I struggled to my hooves. Here, Miss Fluttershy, you were injured. Allow me. One of those giant arms swept down, arcing around me and lifting my entire weight as though it were nothing but a fool's toy. He carried me underarm. If I hadn't been happy to get off my sore little hooves, I might have found it demeaning. But he trundled on much faster than I could gallop, zipping around corners so fast I squealed, thinking I was going to slam into them. As we passed a cross-junction of corridors, how many corridors were in this damn hub? A shot pinged off of his casing, zipping by my face. Stopping, he spun and placed me down behind the corner. I heard the Gatling cannon whir and roared down the corridor. Shouts to get into cover came from the far end. It seems they have spotted us. Good. I simply hid by the corner. Slavers fired around the corners as I felt Mr. Peace grab me again and quickly pull me across the junction behind him, out of the line of fire as bullets whipped off his thick armor. The Gatling cannon belched fire again, making every bit of incoming fire from the end of the hallway cease. Cowering fools. A real stallion should stand and take the bullet in his teeth. Have at you. Popping open his shoulder, I couldn't shout in time to ask him to stop before he unleashed a rocket. The backblast exploded from the back of his casing as it streaked away, erupting in a harsh fireball around the Slaver's position. I heard screams, calls that Semepony was on fire and the sound of dropping debris. The concussive wave made my head spin, throwing my balance as it hit my poor suffering eardrums. Come on, Mom. Let's get you out of here. Picking me up, he roared onward, sometimes stopping to unload fire down a corridor. Slavers were beginning to close on our position, attracted by the loud gunfire. Mr. Peace was powerful. But he was a very easy-to-track presence by the sound. Through labs and weird machine-filled research chambers we soared. Even stairs he simply hopped down. One particularly large flight he just kept gunning for. Mr. Peace? Hold on, Miss Fluttershy. Tally-ho. He ramped directly off them, clearing the entire stairway, accompanied by my shrieking the entire way. Reaching the bottom beside a doorway, he placed me on the ground, where I struggled to regain the ability to move my hooves, simply shivering and staring blankly after the soaring leap. The machine tore a bar from the door before punching it open, and clean off the frame. Apparently I couldn't make allies who treated any door well, before trundling through. Somewhat unsteadily, I staggered after him, adrenaline thumping painfully all through my body. We were back in the storage loading area. This had been the locked door from earlier. It was not empty. As we entered, I saw groups of Slavers returning in through one of the open dock doors. A good dozen in total. Shocked, they simply stood for a few seconds staring at us. They were heavily armed with battle saddles, shotguns, long rifles and heavy pistols. The sheer hurry of our movement in the room held little vagueness as to our intent. They advanced, spreading out and drawing weapons. Stop right there, robot. This the one they say is running about? Yup. Crazy machine gone haywire, didn't say he had a slave with him though. Must have rewired it to try and escape. I heard safeties click off, they weren't going to let us go. I felt Mr. Peace's arm push me toward a large wooden box. Miss Fluttershy. Kindly hide behind that crate there. Mr. Peace has a little water fight. Oh, most glorious of days. I didn't need told twice, ducking behind it, I poked my head out to see the Slavers regarding him warily. You got AP, mate? Think so. Hit it anyway. The sound made me fall to the ground, clutching my odd ears to the sides of my head, crying aloud as the echoing of gunfire battered my senses. Booms, cracks and chattering belts followed by a storm of impacts and pinging. Mr. Peace was rocked back on his wheel by the barrage, almost turned around by the impact of one of the shotguns on his shoulder. The robot's screen flickered from the friendly pony to the angry guard. You stand in the path of Miss Fluttershy. Prepare to be moved aside. In multiple directions. With no effort against the incoming fire, he whirled around, the Gatling cannon and quad barrel unloading with devastating effect. 3 of the Slavers were blown into ash or pulped upon his fire barrage. The others dove for cover. A long rifle shot chipped off his screen, leading the machine to unleash a rocket that drove through a crate to explode directly onto the shooter. Powering forward on his wheel, Mr. Peace careened into one large storage box and hurled it toward another 2 Slavers. Crying out, they dived away from the immense projectile. Zebra-loving is the very definition of failure, you whelps. His wrists popped open, revealing a whole bank of extra barrels. They fired rapid streams of red magic energy that ripped one Slaver limb from limb. Embrace Fluttershy as an apology or you will be eradicated. One Slaver had actually run up behind him, pushing a shotgun's barrel into a more vulnerable looking point. Before he could even fire, one of those tubular arms grabbed and twisted his head so hard it separated completely. I felt my stomach turn. The half-dozen or so slavers that hadn't been killed or fled grouped together in a firing position, 1 meter apart from one another on the loading bay's cargo step. Their weapons unloaded completely, blasting a volley into Mr. P so hard I saw the robot stagger and raise an arm to protect his screen. For a horrible second, he fell backward and only just caught himself. The fire kept coming, leaving black marks on his carapace or denting his structure. I felt guilty. Somehow, this machine was fighting for me, killing other ponies in my name and putting itself in harm's way. All over a mistaken squeak. But it was saving me. And the threat of the master bringing me back from in here was too great. I simply hid, cried and watched as the machine was blasted and torn. Eventually, the firing ceased and I heard multiple weapons click empty. Mr. P stood rock still, before simply standing up. The slavers looked about in a panic, before one of them finally saw me. There. The slave must be controlling it, kill him. Ugh, I hid back as I saw one slaver begin reloading and aiming. Commencing tactical assessment, anti-Fluttershy thoughts detected within Miss Fluttershy's vicinity. The Gatling spun up. The quad cannons began humming. Both shoulders opened to reveal racks of missiles. His wrists popped open to reveal those mini lasers again. The slavers began glancing at one another in worry. 3 threw down their guns. Better wiped than striped, you ignorant louts. The barrage was so loud, so violent, so utterly decimating that I didn't even see or hear much. My ears gave out, I closed my eyes and turned away as he simply continued to fire. Only after the horrific thumping and rocking of the entire floor had ended did I dare open my eyes to see the giant silhouette of Mr. Peace glaring down at me from the smoke. His screen bore the happiest-looking pony I had ever seen. Salutations, Miss Fluttershy. How good it feels to operate under my prime directive. But there are many more on approach, the battle has dissuaded them to find heavier weaponry. We must get you away now. Gradually, I stood and found the entire right-hand side of the loading bay in tatters. Concrete pillars were shattered, wagons torn asunder while there was no sign at all of the slavers. In the distance, through the constant ringing, I could hear roars of slavers while outside there were the murmurings of slaves in the courtyard, abandoned with their carts as the slavers were called to tool up and go robot hunting. There was a way out, yes. But it wasn't through force. Shaking, still breathing far too fast to be healthy, I turned back to Mr. Peace. Why yes. Yes, I need to get out of here, but. I'm sorry. I don't think you can come. I had known since he started following. He wouldn't be able to accompany me. Such a machine just wouldn't work. He'd be shot down by the slavers outside and then me with him. Seeing the screen change to a rather blank-looking pony was enough to wrench my heart. I tried telling myself. This was a machine. But no matter what, he had protected me. Only a few ponies ever had. I understand, Miss Fluttershy. Your role is not mine. I'm so sorry. Crying, I didn't even know what to say. How did a machine feel? It was just obeying orders. Sniffling and sobbing, I just averted my eyes. Thank you. I know I'm proud of what you've done. Is there any way you can stay safe? Mr. Peace's screen flickered a few times, switching from pony to pony before settling on a unicorn with a bright idea. Trundling over, he pulled open a side hatch to one of the storage rooms attached to the loading bay. I could hear hooves coming. We didn't have time. But inside lay a whole heap of machines almost identical to Mr. Peace. Immediately, he began removing his blood-stained arms, unclicking them to replace them with new models. The old ones he tossed in the middle of the floor, along with various chassis segments from himself, again, replaced soon after. I could see his plan. Those coming would think he had been destroyed by the team if he then left or hid in the crate. Now for you, Miss Fluttershy. I can detect many ponies, Non-hostile, just outside with carts. Allow me to load one for you that you may blend in. Suffice to say, pony society confuses me greatly these days. Things were so much simpler when we just shot at stripes. I'm sorry. You weren't meant to be left alone. Pulling a cart over, he dumped some scrap in it before offering the harness to me. I morosely wandered forward, letting him strap me in. Miss Fluttershy, you are my reason for being. Knowing that you are safe is all I require to be sated. No matter how far you are from me. To see you again warms my battle-loving heart. If it so works best for you that I once again must wait, so be it. But no, I will always be loyal to you. If you need me here, simply call for me and I shall sally forth. Wincing, I tried to stop my eyes from watering. Testing the weight on the cart, I found it fairly easy to pull, despite the massive load. All the metals must have been light. But I felt wrong. To just simply go and leave this robot with his misconception that his charge had been killed 200 years ago. If I had learned one thing from all this, it was that the past and present were still connected in ways I couldn't imagine. From every skeleton telling a horrible story to the remnants and memories that littered this wasteland, Equestria had not been forgotten if we simply chose to believe and to look for it. We were a long way from it. But it wasn't impossible. Twilight Sparkle clearly thought so, Aurora Star wanted to. Little Pip, I was sure, believed in it. Protégé. In his own weird way, perhaps too. I wanted to as well. You must go, ma'am, the enemy nears and I must annoyingly deactivate. I would not wish to waste myself when not protecting your oddly peaceful self. Till next we meet, Miss Fluttershy. Thank you, Mr. Peace. Mr. Peace circled on the spot, saluting sharply as I trotted off. He remained dead still in respect and vigilance until I had departed. Only after I moved out of the loading bay did I hear him move away and dig himself into the piles of boxes. Outside, I joined the mass of slaves without much effort. They were all too distracted and worried to care about one more little pony joining them. Shuffling into them, shivering and squeaking in pain as tired muscles strained and pulled, I awaited for order to ring out with our instruction. Get these slaves moving. That mad robot's in the cargo dock. You want to lose the workforce? Right, right. Move it, slaves. Out to the factory, now. We began moving, trundling forward. Casting my eyes up, wiping my matted and patchwork mane from my eyes, I saw myself walking out beneath the six-pointed star. Yes. I really had found what I had wanted in there. The truth that there was a better world. Now all I had to do was believe in little Pip to someday bring it back. I just knew she was the one. And so, I wheeled on, leaving the past behind me. The memories, the pictures, the voices and the survivors. Under the six-pointed star they once again rested, awaiting the attention of those they desired to hear. He was waiting for me nearer to the mall. Slipping out from the factory hadn't been difficult in the mass of slaves. I heard him nearby, that damn eyepiece telling him exactly when I was returning and where he could intercept me before I even knew he'd seen me. I heard Protégé's terse trotting before he emerged from the smog across the street. He smiled. I didn't feel like returning it. I must admit, Murk. I'm impressed, if a little surprised. I don't want to imagine what caused an entire wing of anti-machine-equipped Griffin mercenaries to take off for the Ministry of Arcane Science. Judging by the noise, you stirred something up in there. For this task at least. I had no master to report to. This had been my choice to see the past. I dumped the sparkle sanitizer at his hooves. Yeah. The past. Wandering past him, I just wanted nothing more than to get a drink from the fountain and pass out on the sofa in Glimmer's cell. But I felt him lightly stop me with a hoof. You did as I asked. I won't go back on my offer, Murk. I believe Weathervane is waiting to see you. He said you'd know where. Glimmerlight headed over earlier with him to wait for you when I told them you'd be back. Blinking, I turned, somewhat shocked. How did you know I'd succeed then to send her on ahead? That all-knowing grin emerged on Protégé's face as he picked up the sanitizer thingy in his magic field and slipped it into his own bag. A little trust goes a long way, Murk. Thank you for proving my thoughts correct. Did you learn something from all this? Scuffing my hoof against the tarmac, I avoided his eyes, before nodding. Not what you wanted. I think. But yes. I did. Good. You saw something for yourself, Murk. That's all I can ever ask of you, look at the world and see what you believe for it, like I believe in Master Red Eye's vision to bring that world back. That ministry holds many records and secrets. More ponies would do well to remember them. I thought back, the stable had protected me while trying to tell its story. Fluttershy had helped me to survive my illness like she had promised Equestria she would. Mr. Peace was still guarding that which he felt was important. Protégé had seen things like this, took faith in their existence to justify his actions. Master, do you really think things can go back to how they were before? With ponies like the slavers in there? Like. I wanted to say the master. But I couldn't even dare say a word to him. The master was planning something, but while Sonny and the mayor were under his threat I just couldn't say a word. Protégé turned, pointing a hoof back toward the fun farm. You have not seen the foals, Murk. I see them every few days. Sometimes to help teach them history or philosophy. They are being brought up right, cultured and intelligent. They offer one another gifts on birthdays or share their belongings. Things ponies from 200 years ago might have done. Turning back to me, that eyepiece glowed dully, almost making me squint from the light. Yes, Murk. I do believe it is possible. Perhaps someday I shall take you to meet them. You have proven yourself a valuable pony to me, one I hope might stand by my side for the 2 years to come as we continue to rebuild this world. We strive to be better. I hope you choose to see it this way too. Now. Your friend and doctor are waiting, good day, Murk. With that, he simply nodded his head, leaving me standing alone for a few seconds in thought before I turned and silently galloped off by his side. Just why was such a thing so important to him? Whether Vane's basement had a sachet of Radaway hidden just beside the outdoor entrance. Having trotted up, I drank it as I cantered and Protégé had been right. There was something to learn about freedom in there. But it wasn't about choice, it was about what freedom from hardship truly was. I could be free from Philadelphia someday, yes. But what I might find out there had to be what I made of it. What I made of my own life. Something I could start within here. For now, that simply meant staying by those I cared for and trusted. Freedom was a long way in all forms of thought, but I didn't have to walk that path alone. Protégé had offered his aid on it and there was no reason to turn him down. Ponies may have different ideals. But helping one another is always something that matters. My reverie was somewhat broken by harsh and frenzied screams and slamming ahead of me. The thick gate containing Dr. Flowerpot rocked and bucked on its welded hinges. Raspy roars erupted from within, making me trot back in fear and stay away from the door. Quiet down you crazy fucknut. As expected, Dr. Weathervane got out to the door long before I could even approach his own room. His front hoof slammed and slapped against the wood. Thoom. 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 Raug. I said silence you Philadelphian thundercunt. Shut up. Numerous curses enough to make me feel decidedly less innocent and much slamming on the door later, the maddened ghoul behind it seemed to draw away. Only then did Weathervane turn and beckon me in. Took your sweet fucking time, judging by the reports you woke something up for sure. Now get in here, got something for you. Entering behind him, I saw Glimmerlight awaiting at the far end of the medical lab. Galloping forward, she swept me up, hugging me tightly. Oh good. You're all right. Protégé told me not to worry but really, in this city. I know, I'm just glad to be back. That wasn't fun. Letting me down, I found Weathervane standing and staring, tapping his hoof impatiently before nodding to the stretcher. "Hop up and get your fleece off. I've got 3 radaways I can spare, but we'll get this done first." With a small glance at Glimmer, I found her smiling. What was that about? Almost afraid, I struggled and pulled to get onto the high bed before tugging off my fleece, my wings stinging and aching from lost feathers and bad bones. Weathervane trotted around me, horn glowing in a dank yellow as he observed me. Little bit more radiation than I'd like. You must have wandered into a patch, but that radaway will do the job. Now hold still." Sitting still. I felt my wings began to tingle. What was he doing? The magical glow increased, reflecting off the steel sinks and every basin and beaker in the entire room. Shivering, I felt a pressure grow in either side of my body. Then suddenly pop with a sharp pain. Yelping aloud, I fell to my side as Weathervane's magic ceased. "What did you do? That hurt. Oh, quit your whining, take a look." Turning my head, I almost dropped right off the bed in shock. My feathers. They were back. Glimmerlight grinned madly from the side where she sat. Weathervane just looked proud. "Feather fix spell, been far too fucking long since I did it. Glimmerlight here told me you'd been losing some lately. Now sit still, I've got a little more work to do to strengthen them. I think I can help you with your wings, Murk." I took a sharp breath. Could he make me? "However, you will never be able to fly properly, let me get rid of any false hope now." But with enough work, picky and fucking tedious as wings are, I could be able to repair the damage and perhaps get them moving again. I wouldn't be a very good Pegasus doctor if I didn't damn well try to fix this. No, I'd just be some incompetent ass. Thank you. Thank you so much. I didn't even know how to put it in words, I just kept looking at my wings, with all their feathers restored. Maybe they could move again. Maybe I could once again feel the wind flow through them when held out, even if I couldn't fly that would. It'd be something. I felt Weathervane's hooves pressing me down again as he began work to strengthen them, making my wings feel warm. Glimmerlight nuzzled me slightly, simply glad to see me happier. "You know, I've heard what Pegasus can do with wings that move other than flying, who knows, could be a whole new world for you and that journal." She winked. I simply blushed. "What's up with the journal?" Weathervane was distracted, but clearly still perceptive. I saw Glimmer laugh. "Oh no, please no, don't say a word, not a word." "Oh, who could just say Murky here takes his interests with a lot of detail in them for future reference, doesn't he?" That grin widened. As I felt embarrassed enough that I just dug my head into my hooves. Giggling, she trotted off to sit by Weathervane's desk and spin in his chair. "See? It was fun." "Oh. Glimmer, look in my saddlebag, I got some orbs and stuff." Almost squeaking in joy, I saw her drag the weighed-down bag across and dive face-first into it. Orbs floated out around her invading head before she eventually emerged with a mass of papers in her mouth. The sight drew a small giggle from me, especially when she waggled her eyebrows in a silly motion. It was almost enough to keep my mind off the stinging going on around my wings. Weathervane didn't comment on Glimmer, but rather nodded his head with a gruff noise to attract my attention. His eyes were briefly focused across the lab to a silver sphere sitting on a small tripod. "Never did remember to say thanks for fetching that for me. Spell orb that powerful shouldn't ever end up in Red Eye's hands. I just trust you won't say a thing about down here, all right?" "Yes, sir." Not like I had a choice, Weathervane had saved me too many times to risk making an enemy of him. Besides, he swore at me often enough for whining. Who knew what he'd do if he hated me? Useless to me really, takes 4 unicorns to operate the bloody thing, but prevention is better than watching Red Eye tear apart that research to heal those that would hurt others. Madame Star really had been proud of it. Shit. Pity the poor mayor never got to do much with all that research before those fucking bombs fell. There went those links again. I wasn't sure whether to say anything or not in relation to it. Thankfully, Glimmerlight, quickly gasping and stifling her own cry of surprise, drew all attention away from me. Both of us looking over, we saw her glancing at a leaflet of paper. Murky. Oh, Murky. This could be something here. Could be what? Some new technology? No. She swiveled on the padded chair with her magic propelling it and looked directly at us. More than that. If the rest of these orbs maybe contain little bits of information that I hope they do. This may be a way out. I almost leapt from the table, prompting Weathervane to roughly force me back down again. Glimmer spun in the chair as she spoke. It's a message from an apprentice to Aurora Star. It's simply saying that their application to purchase an abandoned metro station for underground testing has been denied. Because the walls need to be upgraded to stop, quoting here, the idea of some zebra being able to mine their way through the metro tunnel walls right into the ministry itself. This message is dated some time before the Megaspills were unleashed, but who knows? What if they never got around to it? Weathervane snorted. Forgive me if I withhold my boundless fucking enthusiasm. You don't think Red Eyes reinforced all that shit? The metro stations were blocked off years ago to prevent slaves escaping. Even Red Eye can't reinforce the walls of an entire metro system. Doesn't matter, unless you know precisely where to dig for the weak points, then you don't have a hope in hell. Glimmerlight paused, looking at the rest of the papers before speaking again, her eyes not coming away as she floated the orbs up. Maybe you're right. But if Aurora was as organized as she sounds. She was. Then maybe the rest of this stuff might tell us where? The ministry had to have been concerned. Look, I'm gonna take a look anyway, even knowing which metro station it was they were interested in could give us a clue. This could be it, Murky. Spinning again, she glanced at me on each revolution. A way out. Just like I said, we know it's possible now after getting so close. This could be nothing, but it's worth checking out, even if there's a few problems in the way for us to figure out. The chair spun out under her, dumping Glimmerlight onto her rump against the desk. Weathervane's belongings rattled onto it, a gasp from the ghoul preceding a photo frame falling. Until Glimmer's magic quickly caught it. Biting her lip, she shrugged, rubbing her flank with a hoof and wincing. Sorry? HMPH. Kids. The ghoulish doctor made a tug on one feather to test the strength, drawing a small yelp from me. But we had a chance. Twice now I had failed. But with a little hope more there might still be a method if Glimmerlight's theory meant anything. I trusted her with my life. She would do the right thing. I knew it. We could do this. Right now, however, Glimmerlight was still staring at the photo frame. Hey, Weathervane? HMPH? Is this you? He looked up from my left wing, eyes narrowing as he struggled to see. I didn't imagine his vision was doing very well after all this time. Eventually, the squint on his face lessened and his cheeks rather visibly sunk. Sighing, he nodded. Yes. There's me and my son. There was a rather sudden emptiness in the air. Glimmerlight glanced back to it with a more serious look as the obvious was thought by every present. I glanced across and saw the bearded doctor, rather old already with a stern face, standing proudly beside a little blonde and orange buck over Philadelphia's skyline. Weathervane sighed. Most ghouls like me lost some epiphany in the balefire. We all had to come to terms with shit like that. I'm one of the lucky ones. He didn't die in the flames, no. He died peacefully. I got him a stable ticket. No. You might say, knowing he wasn't caught in it is what kept me going this long. I save ponies, I'm a healer. He was one I truly managed to spare all this. No. 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 Sweet Celestia, no. I could feel my eyes tearing up, a weight pressing upon my emotions. Glimmerlight looked at the picture more closely, before setting it back up. Her face was uncharacteristically morose and sad. What was his name? Her voice was quiet, respectful. Weather vane just sighed again. Sundial. My little sundial. Knowing he was safe, well, I guess it's what allowed me to not go feral long ago. Sobbing loudly, I dropped my head into my hooves. I heard Glimmerlight quietly gasp, but move toward me. She knew I had his messages. She didn't know I'd found his corpse. Outside. Far from any stable. Murky? I couldn't stop crying, even Weather Vane stopped to look confused and sad. Her hoof lay on my back. Murky, what's wrong? Nothing. Nothing could bring me to say it. I just kept crying. On and on. As the past brought another little line from one dot to another and created just one more great tragedy to work into the fabric of time itself. Hey there, it's Sundial. Well, who else would it be? I figured I better record a second thing today after that. Well, that thing earlier. Something happier, I need to stay positive, that's what Ministry Mayor Applejack told me when she visited recently to check some things. So. I guess I should do something I haven't properly done yet. I wanted to say thank you, to say it to history on this recording that you might all know I mean it. Thank you. To my old stallion. My dad. He paid for this thing to help me survive and I don't think I've really shown the right gratitude for it yet. He wasn't ever like that. But it's all that's kept me going amongst all this. Ponies care for one another, my dad saved me. I want to save Sky. All from one to the next. I hope whoever listens to this will still be doing the same. Anyway. I should go and get things ready, I've been told that I need to go to a meeting at the factory about this new armor. Maybe a promotion? Wish me luck. Oh and. Dad? If you ever hear this. You're the greatest. I know we don't always show it too much and we live apart but. You brought me up good, duh. I wouldn't be who I am with the mayor I love without your guidance to show me the way. Hopefully, someday I can do the same for so many else as they learn to go out into the world for themselves too. So, bye for now. Footnote, perk attained. Shadow Canter, rank 2. Thievery and infiltration are fancier words that you might begin to use to describe your role in life these days. No longer just a basic beginner, those who want to keep their valuables safe might just begin to sweat a little if you're in the area. You gain a further +10 to sneak and may move 10% faster while sneaking.